I also request our Vice President, Advocate Naneshwar Naravade sir, and our Joint Secretary, Kailas Kashish sir, please come on the dais. Dear participant, whether you are in this hall or joining us virtually, let us welcome our dignitaries with a warm and resounding round of applause. Today, formally commenced today's technical session. I now request to the chairman of today's program, Milind Hendre sir, to share his opening remarks.
Thank you, Pranav sir. Honorable President of MTPA, Advocate Aniruddha Chavan sir. Today's faculty, say Parishit Aurangabadkar sir. Dignitaries on the dais, of the dais, senior members available, present on Zoom platform, as well as tax fraternity. MTPA always update their fraternity with update knowledge and need of the hour. Like this, now we have organized TDS Conclave, 2 days and 4 sessions. Today, 6th July, CA Parishit Aurangabad sir will take session and enlighten us on decode new TDS frame, work 2026, Act 2 accounts, and that after, Savan Suratwala sir will enlighten us on TDS payments to residents. Tomorrow, we have 2 sessions by CS Rajesh Mehta sir. Mehta sir will enlighten us from this hall. He will be coming from Indore for us. He will enlighten us on TDS to NRI, TCS collections, cautions, compliances, and processing. Like this, we are regularly organizing study circle meetings, seminars, national tax conferences, and I request all tax fraternity to please enroll yourself as a member of this association and encourage us to organize more and more seminars, tax study circles, etc. So with this, I request you all to please welcome again today's faculty, CA Parishit Aurangabad sir, and actively participate in this session and remaining session also. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir, for your valuable guidance. Now I request our Honorable President, Advocate Aniruddha Chavan sir, to deliver his presidential remark.
Good afternoon, respected as today's faculty, CA Parishit Aurangabadkar sir, Chairman of this course, Milind Hendre sir, Secretary of MTPA, Advocate Pranav Seth sir, Vice President, Advocate Naneshwar Naravade sir, Joint Secretary Kailas Kashish sir. Very warm welcome to all our esteemed members, senior professionals, and friends joining us today, both here in person and online in this by hybrid format. As the President of Maharashtra Tax Practitioners Association, it is my absolute honor and privilege to welcome you all to the TDS Conclave 2026, jointly organized by AFTP West Zone and our very own MTPA. When we look at the flyer for this event titled Today's Session on TDS, our core mission is a beautifully summarized right there. Know today, compliant, confidently, stay ahead always in our profession. Laws evolve rapidly, and staying ahead is no longer just an advantage; it is a necessity. The today's across core incentive session, our goal in the thing sort of complete TDS mastery. An event of this scale is only as good as it is a guiding lights. We are incredibly fortunate to have an extraordinary panel of faculty members with us who have graciously spared their valuable time to guide us through these complex legal terms. CA Parikshit Aurangabadkar Sarji, who will kick off our conclave of decoding the brand new TDS framework of 2026, seamlessly bridging and gap from the act to our practical accounts. Next, CA Saravan Suratwala Sarji, who will lead our second session today, breaking down the critical and intricate nuance of session 393 regarding payment of precedents. CA Rajesh Mehta sir, who will guide us tomorrow through the deep waters of session 93 concerning payments on NRIs, TCS collection, and will vital compliance processing and consequences. To our standing faculty, will extend our respect, gratitude to respect. We know that your insights will give us the clarity we need to practice with the ultimate confidence and avoid costly penalties for our clients. I am also incredibly proud to highlight that through the MTPS commitment to continuous learning, this landmark conclude in completely free for our Golden Age Pass 2026-27 members. Investing in knowledge today truly saves our tomorrow. Let us make the most of the question and answer session at the end of each day to clear out our doubts directly with the expert. Thank you all of your presence, and I wish everyone a highly productive and enriching today's ahead. Thank you. Thank you. Over to Pranod Jackson.
Thank you very much, sir, to motivate us. Friends, our first technical session is on Decode New TDS Framework 2026 Act 2 Accounts. It is my privilege to introduce our first distinguished faculty, CA Parikshit Aurangabadkar sir, a fellow chartered accountant with over 23 years of rich professional experience. He is a renowned expert in income tax litigation, forensic accounting, internal audit, and AI application in field of finance and taxation. He has successfully represented more than 1,200 clients before various tax authorities and appellate forum, and has handled several high-value litigations and advisory assignments. As a passionate educator, he has trained over 5,000 professionals and students and delivered more than 90 seminars and conferences across the country. His contribution have earned him a prestigious recognition, including the Best Speaker of Income Tax MTPA 2024 and the Income Tax Specialist Award 2025. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome CA Parikshit Aurangabadkar sir with a huge round of applause. Now I request our President, Advocate Aniruddha Chavan sir, to kindly felicitate our esteemed faculty as a token of our gratitude and appreciation. Thank you, sir. Friends present in the hall, please keep your notebooks ready. Our online participant may also keep the relevant provisions handy to make the session more interactive. Throughout the program, you may post your questions in a Zoom question and answer window or YouTube live chat. The selected questions will be taken up during the interactive sessions at the end. Sir, the mic and podium is yours.
On the dais and off the dais. All my virtual participants, colleagues, seniors. It is always a pleasure and pride for me to speak on this platform of my family, MTPA, Maharashtra Tax Practitioners Association. Jointly with it is AIFTPA. So again, I will be more happy to share my knowledge, my experiences, and practical aspects on the basic framework. Basically, this conclave is divided into three parts, where a basic framework which every professional must keep in mind when you are applying the provisions of TDS. Therefore, this first part, which I'm going to share the views on, is the framework which is required for the application of TDS provisions in the new law, that is ITA 2025. And my senior colleagues or my colleagues will be sharing, Shravan sir and Mehta sir will be focusing on the core provisions. So without wasting time, I will be happy to share maximum time to cover the framework and what are the things to be kept in mind when you are dealing with the TDS provisions. First of all, I will just give an overview that what are the changes from old provision, old act to new act. What are the major changes? So major changes is the number of sections, is the number of sections which were there in the old act 1961 has been now converted into a very small number of sections, that is 69 to 30. पहले 69 सेक्शंस थे, अभी 13 सेक्शन में सारी समरी कर दी है और टैबुलर फॉर्मेट्स में सारे डिटेल्स उसमें फिलअप कर दिए हैं एक्ट में, which was not there in the previous, and therefore it was a bit critical to apply to understand the integration of the provision, and which was resulting into litigations. The major reason of litigation is I'm going to share today, which is in the framework of the TDS. So before that, this is a basic structure that has been made a changes 69 to 13 sections. 393 is the core section, which is dealing with your TDS, and further up to 402, 390 to 402. Okay, there was some sharing issue and the PPT was not visible. I think now it is visible to all the participants, right? And I'm audible clearly. Okay, thank you. Now, this 393, which has been divided into payment to resident, NRI, or any other person, and further the compliances and up to 402, all these things are being covered, which were spread up from section 192 to 206 C's in the old act. तो ये बहुत बड़ा रिलीफ है और सबसे इम्पोर्टेंट इनकम टैक्स में टीडीएस प्रोविजन है क्यों because the way GST gives the monthly revenue to the government for running to run the cash flow, to run their all expenditures, उसी तरह TDS ये एक major area है जो last few years it has been expanded to almost all the debit items of your profit and loss account along with your asset side. So whenever you are dealing with the TDS provision, this is how you have to understand and keep many things back of the mind when you are advising. What are they? One more transition impact we have to keep in mind when it comes to TDS provisions. 536. 536 is a section of repeal and saving. Repeal act means the act has been removed, and saving means the provisions of the old act which are still alive and will be applicable in the new law. उसमें ये 4 sections जो है ये थोड़े important लगे, that is why I am sharing it. Clause B of subsection 2 says all rights, obligation, privilege or liability acquired, accrued or incurred under repealed act, that is 1961, will be continued to be valid under ITA 2020. Now, what is the relevance of this in our TDS is one thing, that is when you are registered under TDS, that is income tax for TAN, you get a TAN number that is going to carry all the rights, obligation, privileges in the new law as it is. जैसे पैन है वैसे टैन है और टैन के सारे राइट्स और लायबिलिटीज वैसे के वैसे कैरी होने वाले हैं 2025. क्लॉज सी क्या कहता है कि अगर कोई प्रोसीडिंग इशू हुए है अंडर ITA 1961, that is any TDS proceedings. I have inserted the word TDS here. It is only any proceedings. Relevance to the TDS is any TDS proceedings under ITA 1961, that is notice, assessment, rectification, appeal, revision. ये कोई भी अगर ओल्ड एक्ट के अंडर इशू हुआ है या प्रोसेस चालू है तो इट विल बी कैरीड आउट इन द ओल्ड प्रोविजन इटसेल्फ. इट विल नॉट बी कैरीड आउट इन द न्यू एक्ट. तो ये आपको क्लासिफिकेशन ध्यान रखना है. रीजन इज 31st March 2026 तक जो भी ट्रांजैक्शंस हुए दे आर कवर्ड अंडर ओल्ड एक्ट 1960. So all the TDS provision which are to be applicable of old act until 31st March, वैसे ही सारे proceedings 31st March तक जो भी proceedings issue हो रहे या they are in progress, all these are going to be covered by the old law. इसमें new law का कोई इंटरफेरेंस नहीं आएगा. ये न्यू लॉ के प्रोविजन में लिखा है, उसी को हम सेविंग क्लॉज कहते हैं, रिपेल एंड सेविंग क्लॉज. क्लॉज जे, all circulars, directions, instructions, order, rule issued under the repealed act, that is 1961, shall continue in force subject to any inconsistency with the Act 2020. What is the meaning of this? Very simple. जो सर्क्यूलर्स या इंस्ट्रक्शंस के बेनिफिट अगर हम ओल्ड लॉ में ले रहे थे, वो अगर नए लॉ में कोई प्रोविजन कॉन्ट्राडिक्टरी होगी, then that provision under ITA 2025 will prevail over the circular, will prevail over the instruction. Otherwise, if it is inconsistent, if it is aligning with that circular, then it will be acceptable in the new act also. That is the third part. And the fourth one is survey. 133A. 133A has a clause of TDS survey also. That is, the survey will be conducted by the authorities only to verify whether the tax is deducted and paid or not by the assessor. Same has a corresponding provision in 253 subsection 4 of ITA 2025. So you have to only keep in mind that whatever the surveys are conducted after 1st April shall be as per the procedure of ITA 2025. Again, subject to survey के पहले अगर कोई notice issue हुआ है and the proceedings has a circular impacts, so then it will be in the clause C of 536 subsection 2 that any proceedings issued under old act will be carried on by the provision of old act. So logically अगर देखा जाए तो कोई अप्रैल मंथ में सर्वे नहीं होने वाला है अंडर न्यू एक्ट. तो न्यू एक्ट में सर्वे कब होगा? एटलीस्ट एक क्वार्टर पूरा होने दो, दूसरा क्वार्टर पूरा होने दो, जहां पे आपके टीडीएस रिटर्न फाइल होने. Then there will be some suspicious activity and then there will be some survey activity carried out. तो 6 महीने तक नए एक्ट में कोई होगा नहीं. तो जो भी सर्वे मार्च तक हुए उसी का प्रोसेसिंग जो होगा that will be under the act, under the provision of old act. You have to be very clear. ठीक है, एक बार 194C के अंडर असेसमेंट हो रही है. 194C दैट इज फॉर टीडीएस ऑन कॉन्ट्रैक्टर्स. तो 194C को निकाल के आप 393 में नहीं जाओगे. 194C का उसी में जो बताया गया उसी तरह क्लोज होगा. बिकॉज नए इसमें 393 में अब कुछ बताया गया है, आगे 40 में कुछ बताया गया, 401 में बताया गया. सो देयर इज अ सेपरेट एस्पेक्ट इन द न्यू लॉ. यू कैन नॉट मिक्स अप बोथ. Therefore, you have to be very clear. Why this transition provision I have taken in the first slide? Reason is, आपके पास litigations के जो भी मैटर आएंगे, rather है लोगों को 10-10 साल से नोटिस आ रही है. रीजन इज 201 के टाइम लाइन जो दिए थे वो 7 साल के. अभी भी ट्रेसेस के साइट पे सब लोग जाके देखोगे तो अपने क्लाइंट के पिछले 10 साल में कुछ ना कुछ पेंडिंग ड्यूज मिलेंगे. एंड दैट इज बिकॉज ऑफ द मिक्सअप बिटवीन द वर्ड डिडक्शन एंड डिपॉजिट. कैसे होगा मैं आगे जाके बताऊंगा. वो सारे नोटिसेस आपको पिछले जो भी 10 साल के होंगे दैट आर टू बी क्लियर्ड एज पर द क्लॉज सी ऑफ 536 सबसेक्शन 2 दैट इज एज पर 1961. तो आपके लिए ये एक बिजनेस अपॉर्चुनिटी, प्रोफेशनल अपॉर्चुनिटी होने वाली है. दैट इज यू कैन इनकैश दिस एंड अर्न अ गुड अमाउंट. प्रैक्टिकल बात करना है ना भाई, मेरे सब भाई लोग हैं अपने फ्रेटर्निटी के पेट के लिए सब कर रहे हैं, तो थोड़ा सा बिजनेस की भी बात इसमें बता दे रहा हूँ. ये मेरा प्राइवेट सीक्रेट ओपन कर दिया मैंने, तो आप भी उसमें बेनिफिट ले सकते हो. joke apart, but thing is these are the rights and this is going to be required for next few years till the time the TDS litigations are closed down. ट्रेसेस के साइड पे आपका अकाउंट नील होने तक आपको अपील करना है, आपको रेक्टिफिकेशंस करने हैं, आपको रिविजन्स करने हैं. उसी सारे चीजें आपके ITA 1961 के प्रोविजंस के अंडर आपको करना. So this is the reason I took this transition provision. You have to keep this in mind. Whatever the rights have been created under old laws because of that TAN, whatever the liabilities have been created because of that TAN, so rights and liabilities are in context of income tax applicability on the transactions you have done. So वैसे applicable होने वाले. Now going to the next part. Simplify TDS with 3 words. There is a law, but there is a logic. And after all, everything comes with the ledger. Books of accounts नहीं रहेंगे तो law और logic का क्या करोगे? more than 50%, rather I will say 70% provisions है जहां पे आपको books of accounts mandatory है, ये बताया नहीं गया है, लेकिन it is implied. So I have taken a very basic thing in this framework. What is TDS? Why there is TDS? How does the TDS mechanism work? Maybe यहाँ पे काफी senior लोग बैठे, they will might say that what are these basic things, but I feel that whenever we are studying anything, it should be from the basic to understand कहाँ पे litigation का root cause हो रहा है. प्रोविजन में रूट कॉज नहीं है, प्रोविजन के साथ जो चीजें जरूरी है उसमें रूट कॉज है. एंड मेनी टाइम्स आई हैव यूज्ड दीस थिंग्स इन द डिफेंस व्हेन आई एम फाइलिंग द अपील्स. सो हाउ डज द टीडीएस मैकेनिज्म वर्क? ये क्लैरिटी जरूरी है हमें. मिक्सअप हो गया तो गड़बड़ है, आपको एंटीसिपेट नहीं करते आएगा कहां पे गलती हुई है. वेदर टीडीएस इज मैंडेटरी, then what are the process of tax deduction? Compliances एक general structure जो आगे my senior colleagues, my friend Shravan is going to be taking all this, but यहाँ पे मैं सिर्फ एक pointer लेने वाला हूँ. Prerequisite of TDS applicability, very important. One dimension thinking is not acceptable here. We as a professional needs to have a multiple dimension thinking when we are talking about applicability of TDS. Transaction and accounting policy, very important. Notices का root cause ही यहाँ पे है, मैं आपको इसका भी secret बताने वाला. Transaction and TDS flow, these all things are going to be covered in today's session, today's discussion. Whatever the questions you are going to have, we can discuss it in the latter as the sir has said last में लेना है वो. ये काफी चीजें बेसिक है, लेकिन ये अगर आपको पकड़ी नहीं गई है तो यहाँ पे ही आपके लिटिगेशन का सॉल्यूशन है, ये मैं 100% बता सकता हूँ. So what is TDS? Everyone does know TDS is a simpler mechanism to collect the tax in a easier and simpler manner. मंथली टैक्स कलेक्शन करना है, ये जैसे जीएसटी मंथली है वैसे ये टैक्स डिडक्शन एट सोर्स. इतना ही हम याद रखते हैं. सोर्स के आगे दो चीजें हैं, या तो इनकम रहेगा या तो सम रहेगा, दैट इज कंसिडरेशन रहेगा. एज पर कॉन्ट्रैक्ट कंसिडरेशन. तो कहां पे इनकम और कहां पे सम यूज करना है, दैट इज मेंशन इन द प्रोविजन ऑफ द एक्ट, मे बी 393 और 394. Why there is a TDS? TDS is based on the principle of convenience. Convenience deals with the easy of remitting the taxes. So you have to keep in mind there are multiple principles in the structure which are to be followed by the finance ministry when they are designing the taxation laws. उसमें से ये एक important है कि principle of convenience. Taxpayer को अगर convenience नहीं हुआ, it is a pinching to taxpayer, then it is against the liberty, it is against the principle of taxation convenience. So you have to keep in mind TDS provision is based on this principle. Collection of tax should not cause inconvenience and hardship to the citizen. Basic thing है. Parties involved in TDS procedure. बंद कर रहा है, ये फोकस है ना, ये थोड़े ऑफ करा. Parties involved in the TDS procedure. 5 different parties are involved. We should be very clear because when it comes to litigation, clarity नहीं रहेगी तो आप किस फोरम में आप जाके litigate करोगे, dispute file करोगे, ये नहीं मालूम. Whether it is banking related, payment related, कहाँ पे है तो समझना जरूरी है. हाँ बंद कर रहा है, बाकी से चालू है. हाँ बाकीचे चालू नाही, ते पूर्ण ब्लॅकआउट झालेलं. बाजूचे चालू ठेवून हा नाही, चेहऱ्याचा नको. हा थँक्यू. Okay, so 5 parties are there. Banker is involved, deductor, payer जो टैक्स डिडक्ट करने वाला है, डिडक्टी, पेई. मैं बहुत बेसिक पे बात करने वाला हूँ. मे बी few people seniors might feel that this is a very basic, but trust me that I have consider all this whenever I file the appeal or whenever I go for the litigations, because everything goes on the basic and the department fellows are missing that basics, and वहां पे हम केस हमारी तरफ कर सकते हैं is what I felt. So deductor payer should be very clear. Deductee is whose tax is deducted. एक और एजेंसी यहाँ पे आ रही है, पहले उसको NSDL कहते थे, अभी प्रोटीन है. That is the mechanism through which we are filing the TDS return, और फिर इनकम टैक्स डिपार्टमेंट. सो ये सारे पार्टीज इसमें इन्वॉल्व है. स्ट्रक्चर काफी सिंपल है, मैकेनिज्म काफी सिंपल है. With the example, I have taken this very simple example. If X Limited is there and Y is there, if Y is giving some service to X Limited, then I've taken example that Y has issued an invoice of 100 rupees to X Limited. X Limited will be making the payment to Y after deducting the tax of 10%. So 90 rupees आप Y को दे रहे हो और 10 rupees X Limited डिडक्ट करके बैंक में जमा कर रहे हो. अभी ये जो पेमेंट बैंक में गया है, ये इनकम टैक्स डिपार्टमेंट को कैसे पता चलेगा कि किसका है? एंड सेम वे, इफ मिस्टर वाई हैज पेड द टैक्स ऑफ 10 रुपीज, डिपार्टमेंट को कैसे पता चलेगा वाई का टैक्स वहां पे ऑलरेडी डिपॉजिट हो चुका है? तो इसके लिए रिटर्न फाइलिंग का मैकेनिज्म दो तरीके से है. One is the deductor has to file the return, that is X Limited is going to file the return. That return will include all the details of Mr. Y, that is a PAN number, which under which category the tax is deducted, the amount, gross amount, deducted amount. वहां पे और दो कॉलम रहते हैं, date of transaction, date of booking, which are relating to our income tax provision. इसके ऊपर मैं थोड़ा ज्यादा टाइम देने वाला हूँ. Now, once the tax is deducted 10 rupees, it is deposited with the bank. Bank is endorsing it into the treasury of government of India, that is income tax. तो इनकम टैक्स को पता चल गया भाई पैसे तो आ गए. अभी ये किसके है? टीडीएस रिटर्न में फाइल हुआ है, पैन नंबर के आगे इतना पैसा हमने जमा किया है, ऐसा एक्स लिमिटेड ने बताया. तो एक्स लिमिटेड के वो अमाउंट के साथ काउंटर चेक हो जाता है विद इनकम टैक्स पोर्टल ऑटोमेटिकली. और उसका रिकंसिलेशन करने के बाद एक फॉर्म जनरेट होता है, विच इज आवर फेवरेट वन, 26AS. ये फेवरेट क्यों है टैक्स प्रोफेशनल का? बिकॉज जो इंफॉर्मेशन हमें क्लाइंट नहीं बताता है, वो सारी इंफॉर्मेशन 26AS और AIS बता देता है. उनके भले के लिए होता है, हमें क्या डिटेक्टिव नहीं बनना है वहां. बट वो इंफॉर्मेशन कहाँ से जनरेट होती है ये क्लैरिटी नहीं होगी, तो हाउ यू विल फाइल द claim in future in case of any litigation. The next part is this reconciliation is reconciled again with the individual deductee who has filed the income tax return and claimed that TDS. So if the Mr. Y has claimed the TDS of 10 rupees in this year, department को पता चलता है भाई इसने बराबर टैक्स पे किया है. अगर नहीं किया होगा, क्लेम नहीं किया होगा, या क्लेम किया है लेकिन इनकम नहीं दिखाया होगा, तो ऑटोमेटिकली द डिपार्टमेंट स्क्रूटिनी ऑटो रोबोट मैकेनिज्म पे एआई बेसिस पे वाई को नोटिस निकल जाएगा कि टीडीएस क्लेम किया है बट द इनकम इज नॉट डिक्लेयर्ड ऑफर्ड फॉर इनकम. ये बेसिक मैकेनिज्म आपको ध्यान में रखना है, बैक ऑफ द माइंड व्हेन यू आर अप्लाइंग द टैक्स टीडीएस प्रोविजन. Because tax professionals, as we have to keep a certain vision, that is after 1 year, because notice is not going to generate immediately once you file the quarterly return. It's going to be generated after 1 year, or it will get accumulated on the traces portal. जैसे आज सभी के अकाउंट में accumulate हो गई है, तो आपको ये वहां पे यूज होगा जब उसके आपको लिटिगेशन में जाना है, आपको कुछ असेसमेंट के रिप्लाई देने हैं या अपील फाइल करना. You have to keep in mind the business laws applicable to the transaction. ये मल्टी डायमेंशन एंगल एवरी प्रोफेशनल नीड टू हैव, बिकॉज इसमें जैसे जीएसटी मैंने लिखा है, इनकम टैक्स इज वन ऑफ द थिंग, बट जीएसटी लिखा है, तो जीएसटी इज आल्सो हैविंग सर्टेन इंपैक्ट ऑन योर प्रॉफिट एंड लॉस अकाउंट बैलेंस शीट व्हिच आर टू बी कोरिलेटेड. So similarly, you have to understand whichever the law is applicable and how it is correlated to the nature of business or nature of activity, business activity. Maybe the nature of product, maybe the common. For example, mobile is a trading product and it is a common, but retail activity and wholesale activity makes a difference in the application of different laws in the transactions and automatically applicability triggering the TDS provision. आगे जाके वो भी हम डिस्कस करने वाले हैं. इसलिए ये 9 मिनिमम लॉज मैंने बताया कि जो आपको ट्रांजैक्शन कोई भी एनालाइज करोगे फॉर अप्लाइंग द TDS, you cannot think only one-sided, one dimension. You have to give a multiple thought whether it is not going to be against if you apply the TDS provision, but if it is not against the client in some or the other case. जैसे कि मैं एक एग्जांपल देके बताता हूं जहां पे मैंने एक्चुअल एडवाइजरी में ये काम किया है कि फॉर एग्जांपल एक IT कंपनी है जहां पे मैंने एडवाइस दी है. ये those people have signed a agreement with the software company. IT कंपनी ने दूसरे सॉफ्टवेयर कंपनी को उनका सॉफ्टवेयर बनाने के लिए एक एग्रीमेंट किया. एग्रीमेंट होने के बाद उसमें टाइमलाइन दी थी 2 साल. 2 साल के टाइमलाइन में बल्क पेमेंट के साथ बाकी के भी क्लॉजेस रहते जैसे डिस्प्यूटेबल. तो उसमें डिस्प्यूट वाला भी क्लॉज था. After 1.5 years, there suppose some 50% payment was already made. कुछ 20 लाख का टोटल कंसिडरेशन था, उसमें से 10-12 लाख पे हो चुके. और 1.5 साल के बाद उन दोनों में डिस्प्यूट होने लगे बिकॉज द सॉफ्टवेयर वाज नॉट प्रिपेयर्ड एज पर द रिक्वायरमेंट ऑफ दिस IT client, which was my client. So they started having a dispute, they started having a fights about इतना पैसे में ये फिक्स हुआ है वगैरह वगैरह, and all these things were on the mail. Now the issue was कि TDS अगर डिडक्ट किया है तो you are acknowledging the payment and accepting the demand of another person is considered under evidence act. इंडियन कॉन्ट्रैक्ट एक्ट भी यही कहता है. अगर आप TDS रिटर्न फाइल करते हो, TDS पेमेंट करते हो, एक चीज है. TDS रिटर्न फाइल करते हो तो TDS रिटर्न इज एज गुड एज योर क्लाइंट इज एक्नॉलेजिंग कि भाई मुझे पैसा देना है और मैं उसके ऊपर का TDS पे कर रहा हूं. उन्होंने 20 लाख रुपए TDS रिटर्न में फाइल करने वाले थे. मैंने कहा रुक जाओ भाई, अभी 10 लाख पे भी TDS आप डिडक्ट किया जो है वो उसके ऊपर फाइल मत करो, पेमेंट मत करो. क्यों? क्योंकि अगर आपने TDS पेमेंट कर दिया, वो 10 लाख जो एडवांस दिया है 50%, तो आप एक्नॉलेज कर रहे हो कि टोटल जो कॉन्ट्रैक्ट है दैट आई एम एक्सेप्टिंग इट एंड आई एम गोइंग टू डिस्चार्ज इट करेक्टली एज पर द कॉन्ट्रैक्ट एक्ट प्रोविजंस. डिस्चार्ज बाय परफॉर्मेंस. एंड वंस यू आर एक्सेप्टिंग इट, you cannot file any suit if in future there is a big litigations. दूसरी चीज थी कि रिटर्न फाइल नहीं हुआ था या रिटर्न में कुछ गड़बड़ हो गई थी, रिटर्न में पैन नंबर गलत हो गया. तो दैट वाज फॉर्चुनेट फॉर दैट क्लाइंट. मैंने कहा भाई रिटर्न अभी फाइल ही मत करो और रिटर्न में वो जो TDS है वो किसी और वेंडर के नाम से रिकॉर्ड कर दो और इन लोगों को आप एक लीगल नोटिस भेज. Then that situation, that 20 lakh rupees on which TDS was going to be applicable, अगर मैंने सिर्फ TDS के एंगल से उनको एडवाइस दिया होता तो उनको आगे जाके डिस्प्यूट में आप केस में आपके मेरिट्स काफी वीक हो जाते. So whenever you are going to give advice, you have to keep in mind this. There are multiple aspects. GST में, कंपनी एक्ट में भी है जहां पे आपको TDS किसी ट्रांजैक्शन पे अप्लाई कर रहे हैं तो आपको सोचना है कि if whether it is going to go against the client in future for certain other laws. ठीक है, तो बेसिक लॉ है इंडियन कॉन्ट्रैक्ट एक्ट. I feel that everyone should consider that when you are giving advice on this, because such type of big amounts can create a big problems for the client if we don't have that dimensions, that angles for giving the advice. Process of deducting the tax. ये प्रोसेस मतलब क्या है? दिस इज नथिंग बट व्हाट वी डू नॉर्मली इज आई एम जस्ट पुटिंग इट इन द फ्लो चार्ट. So process, just for a simple understanding and applicability, I have converted this into a flow chart. TDS में जल्दबाजी में एप्लीकेबिलिटी बहुत बढ़िया से मैंने देखी आज तक. 194C 194J ये इंटरचेंज करने में किसी को कुछ तकलीफ नहीं होती है. जब अप्लाई करते हैं क्लाइंट तो इजीली बोल देते 2% ही है ना, उधर भी 2% इधर भी 2%. भाई इतना आसान नहीं है. 2% अगर 194J है और 2% 194C है, नेचर अलग अलग है मेरे भाई. दे आर नॉट द सेम. देयरफॉर आई स्टार्ट विद ट्रांजैक्शन. भाई ट्रांजैक्शन को स्टडी करो. कहां से स्टडी करोगे? कोई करता ही नहीं है. तो टैक्स प्रोफेशनल्स इज गोइंग टू बी रिस्पॉन्सिबल फॉर दिस. यू हैव टू लिटरेट योर क्लाइंट, लिटरेट योर अकाउंट क्लाइंट्स अकाउंटेंट कि भाई पीओ एग्रीमेंट पढ़ते जा, नहीं पढ़ना है तो मेरे पास भेजते जा, मैं पढ़ता हूँ. क्योंकि टीडीएस की एप्लीकेबिलिटी बिल के ऊपर से मत लगाइए, उसका पेरेंट डॉक्यूमेंट पीओ या एग्रीमेंट है. Many times in the audit, I have seen that the PO, that the agreement is having a different nature of work and the invoice is having a different nature. एग्रीमेंट हुआ है सॉफ्टवेयर कंपनी के साथ सॉफ्टवेयर बनाने के लिए, और बाद में पता चला वो सॉफ्टवेयर कंपनी ये कंपनी के लिए बस सर्विस भी सप्लाई कर दी. अभी 194C कहाँ है, वो 194J कहाँ है? देयर आर नो मैचिंग इन द agreement and the invoice. So you will be in trouble in litigation because you are doing contradictory things. उसके बाद KYC वेरीफाई करो, पैन आधार जो ऑटोमेटिक वेरीफाई हो जाता है आजकल AI की वजह से. Then identify the nature of payment. Check whether the account master is correct or not. अकाउंट में आपने, is it audible correctly? हेलो. अकाउंट मास्टर मतलब आपके लेजर्स, प्रॉफिट एंड लॉस के बैलेंस शीट के लेजर्स में आपने क्या हेडर्स यूज किए और आप कौन से सेक्शन के अंडर डिडक्ट कर रहे हो. बिकॉज वन हेडर कैन हैव मल्टीपल सेक्शंस. बिजनेस प्रमोशन इज द हेड, बट उसमें आर्टिस्ट को पेमेंट दिया 194J हो जाएगा. उसमें बाकी कुछ खाने का कॉन्ट्रैक्ट दिया 194C हो जाएगा. गाड़ी का कॉन्ट्रैक्ट हो गया 194C होगा. ये पुराने इसमें बोल रहा हूँ, नए इसमें 393 के अलग अलग टेबल्स है. दैट विल बी very well dealt by my friend Shravan, so I will not be going in that. You have to understand that account masters and the section or the serial number you are going to apply should correlate with your agreement description, with your invoice description. यहाँ पे आपका 50% लिटिगेशन आपके मेरिट में आ सकता कभी भी आगे जाए. देन कम्स द क्लासिफिकेशन ऑफ कैपिटल एंड रेवेन्यू. ये कैपिटल रेवेन्यू का डिस्टिंग्विश जरूरी है क्या? मैंने बहुत सारे अकाउंटेंट्स के ये रिप्लाई सुने हैं कि वो कैपिटल पेमेंट है तो टीडीएस की जरूरत नहीं है. तो बेसिकली मैं यहाँ पे इंसिस्ट करूंगा कि रेवेन्यू एंड कैपिटल इज फॉर अकाउंटिंग पर्पस. वो आइटम P&L में जा रहा है कि बैलेंस शीट में जा रहा है या अकाउंटिंग प्रिंसिपल. टीडीएस के लिए ऐसा कोई प्रिंसिपल नहीं है आज तक. टीडीएस कहता है भाई लेबर चार्जेस दे रहे हो, वो आप फैक्ट्री बिल्डिंग करिए दे रहे हो या आप कोई रिपेयर मेंटेनेंस के लिए दे रहे हो. दैट इज वन इज अ P&L आइटम एंड वन इज अ बैलेंस शीट आइटम. इट इज irrespective. You have to deduct under 194C or under new provision of 393. So यहाँ पे ये क्लासिफिकेशन जरूरी नहीं है. वेरीफाई द नेचर मेंशन इन द इनवॉइस. दैट इज व्हाट कोरिलेट करना जरूरी है. एग्रीमेंट, पीओ, इनवॉइस, व्हाटएवर द डॉक्यूमेंट, चेन documents are there. I'm going to see given the list of that document also in the next slides. Then apply the test of that section. 393 का होगा या 194C होते होंगे पहले के एक्ट में. तो उस पर्टिकुलर सेक्शन की ट्रिगर पॉइंट, एप्लीकेबिलिटी पॉइंट तब जाके आपको अप्लाई करनी है, जब आपके पास ये सारा डेटा कलेक्ट हो जाएगा। 90% क्लाइंट एंड देयर अकाउंटेंट्स ये पहले के 5-6 स्टेप जो है ना वो डिलीट कर देते हैं, डायरेक्ट अप्लाई भी नहीं करेंगे। टेस्ट 2% या 10% कितना करना है? अरे भाई किस टाइप का पेमेंट है, व्हाट इज द नेचर ऑफ एक्सपेंसेस, ये बिना जाने अगर 2% 10% करना होगा तो ये तो लॉटरी जैसा हो गया। तो इतने प्रोविजन पढ़ने की जरूरत ही नहीं हमें। और इसी वजह से वो जो 10 साल से नोटिसेस ट्रेसेस के अकाउंट में वॉल्ट में पड़े हुए हैं ना, वो ये बहुत सारी बेसिक थिंग है जहां जिसकी वजह से वो नोटिस इशू हुए। Then you have to deduct the tax and then pass the accounting entry and then deposit the tax. This should be the ideal flow of your deducting the tax. हमारा flow मतलब as a professional we try to be ideal. I know we try to be disciplined. I know, but our client makes us rather I will say bends us, molds us in an indisciplined way to do the reverse engineering. अभी कौन से चलन में टैक्स भरा है 194J, ओके ठीक है, अभी वो नेचर ऑफ पेमेंट ये बदल दो। तो माय ऑल डियर कलीग्स, एक बात यहाँ पे और ऐड करना चाहूंगा, काउंटर चेक कंपनी एक्ट का। रिवर्स इंजीनियरिंग पहले जमाने में ओके थी, 2024 से ऑडिट ट्रेल नाम का एक आई विल से वायरस डिपार्टमेंट ने कंपनी एक्ट में डाल दिया है। ऑडिट ट्रेल क्या कहता है? एडिट लॉग सबका ट्रैक करो। अगर आप रिवर्स इंजीनियरिंग कर रहे हो तो आप अकाउंटिंग एंट्री रिवर्स में अल्टर करोगे या मॉडिफाई करोगे या डिलीट करोगे तो वो वहां पे एडिट लॉग में ट्रैक होगा, बिकॉज ऑल द कंपनीज आर कवर्ड अंडर टीडीएस प्रोविजन। वहां पे कोई प्रिजम्पटिव का चक्कर ही नहीं। तो अगर आपने वहां पे ये गलती की या अकाउंटेंट ने, हम तो नहीं करेंगे, लेकिन अकाउंटेंट ये जल्दबाजी में करता है कि भाई वो एंट्री एडिट कर देगा, अल्टर कर देगा और उसका सारा ट्रैकिंग एडिट लॉग में बाद में आ जाएगा। दैट विल बी क्रिएटिंग अ प्रॉब्लम। इथून नाही होते ओके, मी तर बोलू का नको? ओके, सांगा मला आलं तर परत. I hope the audibility is clear. If it is not, please mention in the chat box. Coming back to the point that you have to be very clear. No modification, no alteration, no deletion. If it is error, it has to be rectified with certain correct measure and remedies only. It cannot be by making any reverse engineering. ये आपको आपके client को अपडेट लिटरेट करना जरूरी है, अदरवाइज एक टैक्स में से बाहर निकलोगे और दूसरे में फंस जाओ। सो दैट इज द पॉइंट टू बी अंडरस्टूड हियर। प्री रिक्विजिट फॉर टीडीएस एप्लीकेबिलिटी, दिस इज एज पर माय एक्सपीरियंस व्हाट आर द पॉइंट्स एंड आई एम टोटली टेकिंग द एरियाज वेयर बुक्स ऑफ अकाउंट्स इज एप्लीकेबल। जहां पे बुक्स ऑफ अकाउंट्स नहीं एप्लीकेबल है, ऐसे कुछ फ्यू सेक्शंस है, जैसे पहले केस में था प्रॉपर्टी टीडीएस था, तो वहां पे बुक्स ऑफ अकाउंट्स मैंडेटरी नहीं था क्योंकि वो टीडीएस चलन कम रिटर्न था, तो वहीं पे वो रिटर्न जैसा फाइल होता। तो यहाँ पे आपको इंटरप्रिटेशन रूल्स, दैट इज अंडरस्टैंडिंग द प्रोविजन, व्हाट इज द प्रोविजन सेइंग, credited or paid whichever is earlier, threshold limit, how it has been mentioned in the act. Then transaction mapping, as I told you, transaction mapping means there are multiple transactions, you have to understand the transaction clarity, क्योंकि मैपिंग में एक क्लाइंट का एक वेंडर के साथ मल्टीपल अलग अलग टाइप का ट्रांजैक्शन होगा। There will be different types of section, serial number, now not section, I will say in the new law there will be different serial number which will be attracted. तो आप एक ही पकड़ के नहीं सब जगह अप्लाई कर सकते हो, ये जरूरी है। यहाँ पे बुक्स ऑफ अकाउंट्स मैंडेटरी, इसकी क्लैरिटी होनी जरूरी है। क्योंकि बुक्स ऑफ अकाउंट्स के ऊपर ही आपका टीडीएस एप्लीकेबिलिटी है। उसके बाद कोई few terms है which I say it as a TDS glossary which everyone should know. Then certain source document which everyone should insist and every client should maintain it. It is advisable, and the business laws which already I have discussed about. Now, before going to the books of accounts, there is a important area of interplay of accounting policy and TDS liability. This is the reason of triggering the notices for short deduction, late deduction rather, I will say late deduction. लेट डिडक्शन है अकाउंटिंग पॉलिसी की वजह से, और ये ठीक तरह से समझ के अप्लाई नहीं हो रही है, दैट इज अ प्रॉब्लम। अकाउंटिंग पॉलिसी ऑफ रिकॉग्निशन ऑफ द लायबिलिटी इन द बुक्स ऑफ अकाउंट। भाई टीडीएस किस पे अप्लाई हो रहा है? लायबिलिटी पे। प्रॉफिट एंड लॉस की डेबिट साइड हो या एसेट साइड हो बैलेंस शीट में, यहीं पे टीडीएस आपका एप्लीकेबल हो रहा है। तो ये दोनों जो चीजें है, इसमें आप जो पेमेंट करने वाले हो उसकी लायबिलिटी आपने बुक्स में कब रिकॉर्ड की है। सो फर्स्ट पॉइंट आई हैव टेकन हियर इज डेट ऑफ रिकॉर्डिंग द ट्रांजैक्शन एंड रिकॉग्नाइजिंग द टीडीएस लायबिलिटी इन द बुक्स ऑफ अकाउंट्स। वेरी सिंपल एग्जांपल आई विल बी शेयरिंग हियर, और एग्जांपल मतलब एक्सपीरियंस है, ये एक्चुअल मैंने ऑडिट में ट्रैक किया है इश्यूज। सिमिलरली आईटी कंपनी का एग्जांपल देता, वहां पे आपको इमीडिएट समझ में आ जाए। आईटी कंपनीज आर हैविंग मल्टीपल प्रोफेशनल्स व्हिच आर देयर वेंडर्स इंस्टेड ऑफ एम्प्लॉइज। तो वेंडर्स आर वर्किंग एट अ डिफरेंट लोकेशन, एंड इफ इट इज अ स्टाफिंग कंपनी देन देयर वेंडर्स आर वर्किंग फॉर द क्लाइंट्स ऑफ दैट आईटी कंपनी। तो क्लाइंट और वेंडर का कनेक्शन करके, ये आईटी क्लाइंट जो हमारा स्टाफिंग वाला क्लाइंट है, ये कनेक्शन करके देता है, और पेमेंट का स्ट्रक्चर ऐसा रहता है कि दैट द आईटी स्टाफिंग कंपनी इज गोइंग टू इशू द इनवॉइस टू द क्लाइंट एंड द वेंडर इज गोइंग टू इशू द इनवॉइस टू द आईटी कंपनी। नाउ वेरी सिंपल, इनवॉइस आ रहा है, फॉर एग्जांपल जून का इनवॉइस है, जुलाई में आ रहा है, जुलाई में अकाउंटिंग होगा और रिकॉर्ड किया जाएगी उसकी प्रोफेशनल फीस की लायबिलिटी। That is the date of recording the transaction, date of booking the transaction. अभी यहाँ पे मैं टिपिकल आईटी कंपनी का क्यों एग्जांपल ले रहा हूँ, बिकॉज यहाँ पे होता है टाइम शीट का झगड़ा। क्लाइंट का कोई प्रॉब्लम डायरेक्टली नहीं रहता है, क्लाइंट मॉनिटर्स द वेंडर एंड गिव्स अ लिस्ट की इतने दिन छुट्टी ले लिए वेंडर ने, और वो आईटी कंपनी क्या करती है, वेंडर के साथ ये शेयर करके फिर झगड़ा स्टार्ट हो जाता है। जुलाई में झगड़ा स्टार्ट हो गया है तो 2 दिन के लिए, 3 दिन के लिए, बिकॉज द अमाउंट इज क्वाइट बिग, इट इज 1,50,000, 2 लाख, 3 लाख प्रोग्रामर्स रहते हैं, दीज आर हाई पेड प्रोग्रामर्स। तो ये रेडी नहीं होते ये एक्सेप्ट करने के लिए 2 दिन की भी छुट्टी। वो बोलते मैंने टाइम शीट सबमिट किया है, ये चलो इनका झगड़ा चालू है। वी हैव लर्न्ड बेसिक ब्रॉडर एस्पेक्ट इन इनकम, डेफिनेशन ऑफ इनकम। इनकम का डेफिनेशन क्या कहता है ब्रॉडर एस्पेक्ट में? भाई आपका लिटिगेशन हो रहा है, झगड़ा हो रहा है, कुछ भी हो रहा है, इनकम टैक्स आपको पे करना है, और वो भी टाइमली करना है। सो इररिस्पेक्टिव ऑफ योर डिस्प्यूट यू हैव टू पे द टैक्स। अभी अगर जुलाई का इनवॉइस जो वेंडर का आया हुआ है, झगड़ा सॉर्ट आउट होके दिसंबर में आपने रिकॉर्ड किया, तो डेट ऑफ इनवॉइस इज ऑफ जुलाई, यू आर रिकॉर्डिंग इट इन दिसंबर एंड डिडक्टिंग द टैक्स इन दिसंबर। तो भाई जुलाई में जो टैक्स डिडक्शन करके डिपार्टमेंट को आपको टैक्स लायबिलिटी डिस्चार्ज करनी थी, वो आप कर रहे हैं दिसंबर की जनवरी में। कितने महीने लेट हो रहा है? 6 महीने लेट हो रहा है। इफ इट इज 6 मंथ लेट, इट इज अ लेट डिडक्शन। लेट डिडक्शन के लिए इक्वल पेनल्टी है भाई। और हमें लगता है, हमने तो, वो क्लाइंट पहले आके बोलता है मैंने तो पेमेंट कर दिया है। अरे तूने पेमेंट कर दिया है जनवरी में, why then you have accepted the invoice of July? In such case, you have to step in the advisory role and advise the client and their accountant. If such type of disputes are there, if the vendor's invoice is hold up, you have to insist on changing the bill. अभी वो चेंज नहीं करता है, वो बोलता है मैंने तो GSTR 1 में भर दिया है, फिर से प्रॉब्लम होगी। आ गया ना जीएसटी लॉ बीच में, तो आप टीडीएस संभालते संभालते जीएसटी की वजह से फिक्स हो रहे हैं वहां पे कि उसने जीएसटी रिटर्न में जून में भर दिया है वो, और आप बोल रहे हैं मेरे को जुलाई के जगह दिसंबर का इनवॉइस दे दीजिए, वो नहीं दे पाएगा, उसकी तो जीएसटी की लायबिलिटी बुक हो गई और आप टीडीएस में क्वेश्चन मार्क डाल के बैठे हुए। ये इंटरप्ले अगर एडवाइजिंग रोल में आपने नहीं किया पहले एज अ प्रिवेंटिव, इट विल बी 100% डिफिकल्ट टू करेक्ट इट इन फ्यूचर। यू हैव टू पे द पेनल्टी। मेरे 2-3 क्लाइंट ने ये बिना एडवाइस का ये गड़बड़ करके रखा और पेनल्टी भरना पड़ा। Then I told them that late deduction is the date of invoice which is to be recorded. The liability is to be recorded in the books of accounts on the same date when you are recognizing that invoice as your liability. और जिस दिन आप लाइबिलिटी रिकॉर्ड कर रहे हो उसी दिन आपकी टीडीएस की लाइबिलिटी ऑटो ट्रिगर हो जाती है, आपको कुछ करने की जरूरत नहीं है। आपने अकाउंटिंग एंट्री पास की या नहीं की, रेस्पेक्टिव ऑफ दैट द लाइबिलिटी इज रिकॉग्नाइज्ड, ऑटो मोड पे वो रिकॉग्नाइज होती है, बिकॉज द वर्डिंग्स इन द लॉ आर क्रेडिटेड और पेड व्हिचएवर इज अर्ली। और इसकी वजह से सारे ट्रांजैक्शंस आपको एडवाइजिंग मोड में पहले बताना है कि क्या जरूरी है रिकॉर्डिंग के लिए। या तो डेट बदल दीजिए, उसको कह के इनवॉइस चेंज कर लीजिए, या तो पेनल्टी उससे आप ले लीजिए, because late deduction is going to be chargeable. Short deduction is having some other aspects. Short deduction is not a part of policy. लेकिन late deduction is a part of accounting policy and therefore you have to keep that interconnectivity of accounting policy and TDS right. अभी दूसरा पॉइंट उसमें मैंने लिया है कि अगर आप भले बुक्स मेंटेन कर रहे हो कैश बेसिस पे, तो ये हो गया अकाउंटिंग एक्चुअल बेसिस वाला पहला वाला। कैश बेसिस पे टीडीएस तो भरना पड़ेगा, ऐसा थोड़ी है कैश बेसिस है तो टीडीएस नहीं भरना पड़ेगा। इनकम टैक्स प्रोविजन अलाउ यू टू मेंटेन द बुक्स एज पर योर मेथड यू हैव फॉलोड रेगुलर, बट यू हैव टू डिस्चार्ज द लायबिलिटी। तो कैश बेसिस पे लायबिलिटी में ट्रिगर पॉइंट कहाँ आने वाला है, वर्डिंग्स आर क्रेडिटेड और पेड व्हिचएवर इज अर्लियर। तो भाई पेमेंट जिस दिन कर रहे हो उसी दिन आपको टीडीएस डिडक्ट करना है। अभी यहाँ पे तकलीफ वाली चीज क्या होती है, वेरी सिंपल, आई एम गोइंग टू टेल यू, और ये सब लोगों ने फेस की है। सामने वाला अगर कैश बेसिस पे मेंटेन कर रहा है, मैं अदरवाइज बोल रहा हूं, डिडक्टी के साइड, डिडक्टी पेई के साइड से बात कर रहा हूं, डिडक्टर के साइड से नहीं बात। If the deductor is maintaining the books on cash basis, he is going to deduct the tax on cash basis. तो डिडक्टी की जो इनवॉइस है, अगर डिडक्टी एक्रूअल बेसिस पे मेंटेन करता है और डिडक्टर कैश बेसिस पे मेंटेन करता है, देन ऑलवेज देयर विल बी अ गैप इन द टैक्स डिडक्टेड इन द इनकम डिक्लेयर्ड बाय द डिडक्टी, बिकॉज पेमेंट, फॉर एग्जाम्पल अगर मैं प्रोफेशनल फीस का पेमेंट की बात कर रहा हूं, सामने वाला जो डिडक्टर है उसने कैश बेसिस पे 25-26 ईयर की प्रोफेशनल फीस 26-27 में पे की है, तो वो 26-27 में उसका टीडीएस डिडक्ट कर रहा है, जबकि मेरा वो इनकम पिछले साल का है। तो वहां पे इनकम टैक्स के लिए मैं इनकम ऑफर करूंगा 25-26 में और टीडीएस मेरा डिडक्ट हो रहा है 26-27 में, और टीडीएस पे भी उस साल में होगा। ये डिफरेंस जो आ रहा है इसको आपको रिकनसाइल करके रिकॉर्ड पे रखना पड़ेगा, बिकॉज इन 1 ईयर यू आर गोइंग टू ऑफर द इनकम। आई एम टॉकिंग फ्रॉम द डिडक्टिव पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू, जिसको इनकम मिल रहा है उसके साइड से बात कर रहा हूं। अगर दोनों में अकाउंटिंग मेथड अलग होगी तो उसका रिकॉर्डिंग और उसका टीडीएस 26 में दिखना, ये दो अलग अलग साल में होने वाला। रीजन इज मैं एक्रूअल पे मेंटेन कर रहा हूं तो मैं 25-26 में वो फीस को इनकम दिखा रहा हूं, लेकिन उसका टीडीएस अगले साल में कट और डिडक्ट हो रहा है, सामने वाली पार्टी कैश बेसिस पे जा रही है। ये रिकंसिलेशन आपको रखना जरूरी। थर्ड कैटेगरी इज वेरी सिंपल, सेक्शन 58 प्रिजम्पटिव टैक्सेशन, नो बुक्स ऑफ अकाउंट्स, so no TDS except with certain few exception, as I told you, wherever the books are not needed and the TDS payment is chalan cum return basis, जैसे प्रॉपर्टी TDS, जहां पे आप रिटर्न जैसे सारे डिटेल्स भर देते हो, तो वहां पे आपको बुक्स की जरूरत नहीं है। तो 58 के अंडर भी अगर आप रिटर्न फाइल कर रहे हो तो प्रॉपर्टी टीडीएस तो पे करना पड़ेगा, लेकिन बाकी सारे आपके टीडीएस में से आप बाहर निकल जाते हैं। ये क्लैरिटी इसमें आपको रखनी है। Interpretation of transaction. Again, I am going on all these basics where it is connected with your litigation aspects. तो इंटरप्रिटेशन ऑफ ट्रांजैक्शन में सबसे कंफ्यूजिंग एरिया रहता है फॉर्म एंड सब्सटेंस। फॉर्म ऑफ ट्रांजैक्शन means what? It is basis, it is a legal label or the document which is defining the form of transaction. और सब्सटेंस क्या कहता है? इकोनॉमिक सब्सटेंस ऑफ द ट्रांजैक्शन, व्हाट इज द कंसिडरेशन, व्हाट इज एक्सचेंज, उसको कहते हैं इकोनॉमिक सब्सटेंस। तो इसमें मैंने स्लाइड में दो एग्जांपल दिए कि फॉर एग्जांपल सीए प्रोवाइड सर्विस टू आर्किटेक्ट and in consideration the architect provide a service to CA. And similarly, one more example, A provide a service of labor supply to B and in consideration B provide the catering services to A. ये दोनों में कंसिडरेशन और नेटिंग भी हो सकता है। फॉर एग्जाम्पल 10 लाख की फी सीए चार्ज कर रहा है और आर्किटेक्ट भी चार्ज कर रहा है, नेटिंग हो गया। फॉर्म ऑफ ट्रांजैक्शन नेटिंग भी हुआ, तो सब्सटेंस क्या है? देयर इज अ सेल ऑफ सर्विस फ्रॉम सीए एंड सेल ऑफ सर्विस फ्रॉम आर्किटेक्ट। तो दोनों ने एक दूसरे का टीडीएस डिडक्ट करना इसमें बाय डिफॉल्ट है, इफ इट इज एप्लीकेबल। Similarly, labor service हो, catering हो, you have to understand what is the substance of the transaction. Form over the transaction, form of the transaction and substance of the transaction, very important aspect for applying the TDS provisions. Two more example I have covered here just to understand. ABC firm has taken housekeeping contract service from B. Partner X of firm has paid to B on behalf of firm. Firm ABC reimbursed to the partner X. कौन TDS इसमें डिडक्ट करेगा और किसका करेगा? फॉर्म में कुछ अलग दिख रहा है, पेमेंट अलग कर रहा है, तो you have to see the ownership of the source document. If ABC firm is taking the services, then obviously the invoice should be in the name of ABC. और ओरिजिनल डॉक्यूमेंट सारा एबीसी के नाम से होगा, तो एबीसी की ओनरशिप हो गई। ये फॉर्म जो भी दिख रहा है, पेमेंट कौन कर रहा है उसके ऊपर नहीं जाना है, नहीं तो फिर ये अगर रीइंबर्स वर्ड यूज किया है मैंने, ये रीइंबर्स वाला एक इसके ऊपर अलग सेशन हो सकता है। इतना डिटेल है वो और इतना कंफ्यूजिंग है। रीइंबर्समेंट और एक्चुअल एक्सपेंसेस थिन लाइन डिफरेंसेस है, कंफ्यूजन है टीडीएस कैसे लगाना है। तो उसमें काफी केस लॉज है जहां पे रीइंबर्समेंट पे टीडीएस नहीं आता है। तो यू हैव टू बी क्लियर इन सच टाइप ऑफ ट्रांजैक्शन वेयर द फॉर्म एंड सब्सटेंस आर टू बी classified clearly. Similarly, one more example, A has borrowed from B 1 lakh rupees. A invests the borrowed amount in partnership firm with B. तो B से पर्सनल कैपेसिटी में उसने लोन लिया है और लोन लेके B के साथ ही वो इन्वेस्टमेंट कर रहा है। A received interest from the firm, क्योंकि फर्म में उसने 1 लाख रुपए इन्वेस्ट किए और जो इंटरेस्ट लिया है वो उसने बी को दे दिया है। अभी आपको इसमें कैपेसिटी समझनी है। फॉर्म तो बहुत सिंपल दिख रहा है, लेकिन सब्सटेंस क्या है? दैट व्हेन ए इज बोरोइंग द अमाउंट एंड रीपेइंग द अमाउंट, इट इज इन द पर्सनल कैपेसिटी, बट व्हेन इट इज इन द पार्टनरशिप कैपेसिटी, इंटरेस्ट फ्रॉम द फर्म व्हिच ए इज टेकिंग, उस पे पुराने सेक्शन 194T वाला जो है वो कंपैरेटिवली अभी 393 में भी एप्लीकेबल होगा। वो बी को ही पे कर रहा है, ये पर्सनल कैपेसिटी का ट्रांजैक्शन है, तो उसका सब्सटेंस इसके साथ मिक्स नहीं हो सकता है। सोर्स डॉक्यूमेंट अगर देखे जाए तो ये मिनिमम सोर्स डॉक्यूमेंट है जो आपको कंसिडर करना है व्हेन यू आर अप्लाइंग द टीडीएस प्रोविजंस। परचेज ऑर्डर, एग्रीमेंट, इनवॉइस, बैंक स्टेटमेंट, ये 1 and 2 शुड बी अलाइन, पीओ और इनवॉइस। नहीं तो जैसे मैं एग्जांपल मैंने दिया, ये सॉफ्टवेयर कंपनी है और फिर बाद में कंस्ट्रक्शन का कॉन्ट्रैक्ट किया है उसी के साथ, ये नहीं हो सकता। मतलब एग्रीमेंट किया है सॉफ्टवेयर का और इनवॉइस में कंस्ट्रक्शन का इनवॉइस दिया है, एनी कंस्ट्रक्शन, दिस कैन नॉट बी एक्सेप्टेबल बाय डिपार्टमेंट वेरी क्लियर. बैंक स्टेटमेंट वी हैव टू अंडरस्टैंड किसके नाम से पेमेंट गया है, फॉर्म ओवर सब्सटेंस और सब्सटेंस ओवर फॉर्म. केवाईसी ऑफ डिडक्टिंग, प्रोविजन ऑफ एक्सपेंसेस, ये एक बहुत डेलिकेट एरिया है. प्रोविजन ऑफ एक्सपेंसेस शुड बी अंडरस्टूड इन द प्रॉपर कॉन्टेक्स्ट ऑफ अकाउंटिंग. सर्टन और अनसर्टन, सर्टन with ascertainable or unascertainable amount. Similarly, uncertain with ascertainable or unascertainable amount, because when it is unascertainable, when it is uncertain, it becomes contingent and then there is no provision in the books of accounts. But when we are doing the provision in the books of account and if it is certain, then TDS provisions are applicable. जैसे कि ऑडिट फी पेमेंट, उसका बिल आता है बाद में, लेकिन अनबिल्ड एक्सपेंसेस पे, मतलब हम प्रोविजन करते हैं ऑडिट फी की हो या कोई प्रोफेशनल फीस की हो 31 मार्च के लिए, और उसके ऊपर टीडीएस डिडक्ट करके 31 मई तक पे करते, रिटर्न फाइल कर देते. सेम वे, 6th पॉइंट इज वेरी वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट टू बी रिकंसाइल्ड विद योर जीएसटीआर 2B. 2B के जैसे मैंने कहा, पी एंड एल के सारे आइटम्स आपके कवर हो रहे हैं 393 में हो या दूसरे कोई सेक्शन में. पी एंड एल और एसेट के जिसमें आप 2B में आईटीसी क्लेम करते हो, उसका क्रॉस वेरिफिकेशन होना जरूरी है. नहीं तो 2B में वेंडर्स अलग दिख रहे और टीडीएस किसी हालत का पे नहीं है. बहुत बार लास्ट मोमेंट पे जीएसटी का बिल रिप्लेस किया जाता है, अनरजिस्टर्ड डीलर के बिल आते हैं और फिर बाद में उसमें जीएसटी वाला बिल आ जाता है और हम टीडीएस डिडक्ट करते हैं अनरजिस्टर्ड वाले के नाम से. फॉर एग्जांपल एक्स नाम से बिल आया था, फिर बाद में वो चेंज करके उन्होंने कहा कि नहीं जीएसटी वाला बिल चाहिए, और उन्होंने एक्स की जगह वाई के नाम से जीएसटी का बिल दे दिया क्योंकि वाई की फर्म जीएसटी में रजिस्टर्ड है. तब तक टीडीएस डिडक्ट करके एक्स का टीडीएस रिटर्न में फाइल हो चुका रहता है. अभी मुझे बताइए आप रिकंसाइल कैसे करोगे? इट विल बी ऑलवेज ओपन, बिकॉज if x and y both are friends, even then अकाउंटिंग या टीडीएस के रिटर्न में फ्रेंड्स नहीं लिख सकते ना हम कि ये उसका ही रिटर्न है. क्लाइंट बोल देगा नहीं नहीं उसका ही आदमी है, उसके आदमी का ही जीएसटी का बिल है. अरे भाई उसके आदमी का हो या उसके किसी रिश्तेदार का हो, लेकिन हमें पैन नंबर से इंटरेस्ट है, बिकॉज उसके साथ रिकंसिलेशन करना है आपको पैन और जीएसटी नंबर के साथ. लोअर डिडक्शन सर्टिफिकेट इंपॉर्टेंट है, वो अगर होगा ऑनलाइन जनरेट किया हुआ तो ही उसको वैलिडिटी देखनी है, वैलिड कब तक है. 8th पॉइंट इज वेरी रिस्की एंड वेरी स्लिपरी. यहाँ पे काफी बार मैंने देखा है ऑडिट में कि यहाँ पे टीडीएस डिडक्ट करना रह जाता है, अनलेस इट इज अ वेरी बिग कंपनी where the regular monthly internal audits are going on. Otherwise, if it is a small company, normally this in kind payment जो रहते हैं, for example, सेल्स टारगेट अचीव किया है एंड यू गेट अ सिंगापुर वाउचर, यू गेट अ गोल्ड कॉइन, यू गेट अ सिल्वर कॉइन, यू गेट अ टीवी सेट, यू गेट एन नंबर ऑफ फलाना थिंग जो भी उसमें आ रहा है स्कीम में. ये मैंने जैसे एग्जांपल बताया था कि होलसेलर और रिटेलर में, होलसेलर को ये सारे मिलते हैं और ये मिलते हैं तो क्रेडिट नोट में आते हैं, और वो क्रेडिट नोट कभी भी क्लाइंट जल्दी से हमें दिखाता नहीं है क्योंकि उसको मालूम है कि ये अकाउंट फॉर हो गया तो ये इनकम में जाएगा. और जिसने इशू किया है उसको लगता है कि इन काइंड में किया है तो इसमें टीडीएस काटने की क्या जरूरत है. तो इस तरीके से दोनों दे आर शेकिंग हैंड विद ईच अदर एंड देन एआईएस शेक हैंड्स विद ऑल दिस थिंग्स एंड लेट अस नो कि कहाँ पे ये क्रेडिट नोट फाइल हुआ है, क्योंकि जीएसटीआर 1 तो सब मिरर सब क्लियरली हमें मिरर की तरह बता देता है. तो ये 4-5 डॉक्यूमेंट हमें क्रॉस वेरीफाई करने. लास्ट में लेजर भी है विच वी ऑल नो, वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट थिंग्स. तो ये इन काइंड वाला एलिमेंट जो है ना, यू हैव टू बी वेरी क्लियर बिकॉज देयर आर वाउचर्स मेनी टाइम्स इशूड विदाउट पेमेंट ऑफ विदाउट डिडक्टिंग द टैक्स. जैसे अभी गिफ्ट और विनिंग्स आए, वो भी मैं आगे जाके एक स्लाइड में बताने वाला हूँ. सो कंसिडरिंग द टाइम कंस्ट्रेंट मैं थोड़ा सा फास्ट इसमें ले रहा हूँ. TDS की glossary. Why I said glossary? Because when you are reading the provision of TDS, you have to be very clear with certain terms if you want to apply it in a correct manner. नहीं तो क्लाइंट जैसा बोल रहा है 2% 194J हो या 2% 194C हो, तो उसके लिए दोनों सेम है, लेकिन हमारे लिए वो अलग अलग है बिकॉज उसका अकाउंटिंग हेड ही बदल जा रहा है. कॉन्ट्रैक्टर हो या प्रोफेशनल फीस हो अलग है ना, वो एक ही कैसे होंगे. हालांकि वहां पे टेक्निकल प्रोफेशनल्स के लिए 2% है, but it has a different altogether agreement, altogether contracts. Its role is different. So you have to understand that. So यहाँ पे 14 different terms है, उसके important terms पे मैं highlight करूंगा, जैसे business everyone does know, books of accounts I have already told, ये definition 219 में दिया हुआ है, everyone should have this clarity. Method of accounting जो 145 पुराने एक्ट में है, 4276 है नए एक्ट में. Accounting of purchase and accounting of expense, as I told you, it should be very clear here. Accounting policy clear होनी चाहिए, liability कब recognize करनी है. इनकम का अगर डेफिनेशन क्लियर नहीं होगा तो सामने वाले को हम पेमेंट कर रहे हैं और 393 या 394 या कोई भी प्रोविजन में व्हाट इज द वर्ड यूज, वेदर इट इज अ टैक्स डिडक्टेड ऑन इनकम देयरइन और टैक्स डिडक्टेड ऑन कंसिडरेशन, दोनों में फर्क है. 100 रुपए कंसिडरेशन है लेकिन उसमें इनकम 10 रुपए है तो 10 रुपए पे टीडीएस काटो, 100 रुपए पे नहीं काटना है. या कंसिडरेशन पे बताया गया तो बिकॉज 194 क्यू जो पुराना था वो कंसिडरेशन वाला था, ये एग्जाम्पल बता रहा हूँ. सो उसके साथ 7 नंबर पॉइंट इज एनी सम शुड बी वेरी क्लियर, वॉट एवर इज इन एग्रीगेट. देन एनी पर्सन के डेफिनेशन में जितने भी कैटेगरी के पर्सन आते हैं वो सारे एनी पर्सन जहां पे भी यूज किया है वो आपको कंसिडर करने हैं. देन कॉन्ट्रैक्ट, wherever the word contract is used, it has not been explained, contract और consideration, तो आपको यहाँ पे इंडियन कॉन्ट्रैक्ट एक्ट सेक्शन 2F और 2H का डेफिनेशन यहाँ पे लगाना है. द सबसेक्शन आई एम मिसिंग आउट, बट सेक्शन 2 में उसमें दिया हुआ है, वो अप्लाई करना है जब कोई भी डेफिनेशन अप्लाई नहीं है. 11 से सबसे इंपॉर्टेंट पॉइंट है, 11, 12, 13, 14, दैट इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. टाइम ऑफ क्रेडिट एंड टाइम ऑफ पेमेंट, इसके ऊपर आपकी पेनल्टी डिपेंड है. क्रेडिट लेट होगा, लाइबिलिटी लेट होगी, लेट डिडक्शन का लगेगा. Similarly, if it is time of payment is late, you will get a penalty for late payment. उसके बाद deduction of tax and deposit of tax, two different activities. You cannot combine them together. दिखने में अलग अलग है भाई, आजकल के डिजिटल इसमें ये दोनों अलग अलग इंपॉर्टेंट है. डिपॉजिट ऑफ टैक्स इज वन इटसेल्फ इज अ इंपॉर्टेंट एक्टिविटी, क्योंकि इसके ऊपर भी कई केस लॉज आए हुए हैं. एक छोटी सी केस लॉ की डिस्कस करके बता देता हूँ. डिजिटल पेमेंट की वजह से 7th को हमें पेमेंट करना है, डिजिटल पेमेंट की वजह से रात को 11:55 तक आपकी आरटीजीएस रिफ्लेक्ट हो गई तो भी चलता है, 7th ही दिखेगा. एक केस में 11 बज के आई थिंक 11:45 दे हैव इनिशिएटेड द एनईएफटी और आरटीजीएस फॉर द पेमेंट ऑफ टीडीएस, और वो रिफ्लेक्ट हो गई इनकम टैक्स या बैंक के पोर्टल पे 12:10. लिटिगेशन amount was something 15 lakhs to 20 lakhs, substantial amount. उसके ऊपर इंटरेस्ट निकालो एक महीने का, एक दिन का इंटरेस्ट, बिकॉज इंटरेस्ट इज ऑन फ्रैक्शन पार्ट ऑफ द मंथ और मंथ. तो सोचो डिपॉजिट टाइमली बहुत जरूरी है और उसके साथ इसके स्क्रीनशॉट भी जरूरी है. लिटिगेशन कैसे करो इफ यू डोंट हैव द स्क्रीनशॉट कि मैंने कितने बजे एनईएफटी जनरेट की है, वो फॉर्म जो जनरेट होता है और वो कितने बजे रिफ्लेक्ट हुआ है, आपके पास टाइमलाइन आती है, उसकी स्क्रीनशॉट निकाल वो आपको दिखानी पड़ेगी इफ यू वांट टू कम आउट ऑफ दिस पेनल्टी ऑफ 1 month और सो. इंटरेस्ट पेनल्टी नहीं, इंटरेस्ट की बात. सो ये डिपॉजिट डिडक्शन को आप लाइटली, क्लाइंट को कहिए लाइटली मत लीजिए, बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट एरिया है. डिडक्शन अगर गलत हो गया, लेट हो गया, तो ये ट्रेसेस पे अपना अकाउंट बड़ा खोलते जाता है अपने लिए और एक साथ 10 साल में दिखा देता है. Penal consequences, just an overview because all this will be covered by the senior colleague Mehta sir. In the old section, old act, section 40 था disallowance वाला, 201 था जो 398 हो गया. फिर पेनल्टी थी 271 की, 270 के सीरीज में 448, 468 एंड प्रोसिक्यूशन 476. एक सवाल मैंने शुरू में किया था, वेदर टीडीएस इज मैंडेटरी. ये पढ़ने के बाद किसी को भी बोलिए कि ये मैंडेटरी है क्या नहीं है. अगर मैंडेटरी नहीं है तो ये प्रोविजंस क्यों है, तो इट इज मैंडेटरी. इट इज मैंडेटरी इफ इट इज एप्लीकेबल. डिसअलाउंस और ये सारी डिटेल चीजें सर विल बी कवरिंग इन दिस सेशन, सो आई एम जस्ट touching these areas. Just few 2-3 parts I am covering here to make more clear that how you have to apply, analyze the TDS provisions when it comes to the transaction, because everything is starting from the transaction. ध्यान रखिए, क्लाइंट के लिए TDS पहले काटना है, फिर ट्रांजैक्शन करना। हमारे लिए ट्रांजैक्शन के बाद ही TDS काटते हैं, तो ये डिफरेंस हमें रखना ही है। और अभी डिजिटल इकोनॉमी में जहां पे ऑडिट ट्रेल जैसे टूल्स गवर्नमेंट ने अप्लाई किए हैं, आपको इसका रिस्क एनालिसिस क्लाइंट को बताना है। अकाउंटिंग ऑफ परचेस ऑफ मटेरियल में P&L के कुछ डेबिट्स की एक दो झलके यहाँ पे लेने वाला। अकाउंटिंग पॉलिसी should be very clear, recognition of liability. I am assuming the accrual basis only, and that is why. So accounting policy में recognition of liability 194 के लिए, क्यों के लिए बात कर रहा हूँ, क्यों मैं काफी डिस्कशन के लिए, चर्चे के लिए, लेक्चर्स के लिए एरिया छोड़ा था 10 करोड़ का टर्नओवर। अभी नए इसमें उन्होंने छोड़ दिया है वो बात, बोल रहे आई थिंक राइट 7 सर, उसमें अभी उन्होंने क्लीन कर दिया है कि 194 क्यू प्लेनली एप्लीकेबल, परचेस ऑफ मटेरियल अप्लाई दैट प्रोविजंस। तो वहां पे आई विल कम टू द पॉइंट विच आई वांट टू कवर इज रिकॉग्नाइजिंग द लायबिलिटी। The way I said that there are disputes in the services, similarly there are disputes in the purchase of material, जो बाद में डेबिट नोट में आते हैं। आईटीसी के लिए हम 6 महीना 180 डेज, एमएसएमई के लिए कॉल लेते हैं, लेकिन टीडीएस का कॉल नहीं लेते। तो जब भी आप अप्लाई कर रहे हो परचेज ऑफ मटेरियल के लिए, जो पुरानी 194 वाली प्रोविजन थी, तब अप्लाई करते वक्त आपको ये 5 अलग अलग डेट्स यहाँ पे है, एंड द 6th पॉइंट इज द ट्रिगर डेट। सो ट्रिगर डेट मतलब आई एम टॉकिंग अबाउट द लायबिलिटी ऑफ टीडीएस। द लायबिलिटी ऑफ टीडीएस विल बी देयर once the liability of the purchases is recorded in the books of accounts. So once you pass the entry of purchase to vendor, आपकी TDS की भी liability trigger हो रही है। लेकिन परचेस के प्रोसीजर में ये सारे डॉक्यूमेंट्स क्रिएट हो रहे हैं। परचेस ऑर्डर है, रिसीट ऑफ गुड्स है, GRN है, डेट एंट्री है, इनवॉइस कब रिकॉर्ड हो रहा है बुक्स में, बीच में डिस्प्यूट हो रहा है, रिटर्न जा रहा है, कुछ आ रहा है, डेट ऑफ पेमेंट है। इतने सारे अलग अलग डेट आने के बाद आप कौन से डेट को इनवॉइस रिकॉर्ड करोगे, उस डेट पे आपकी टीडीएस की लायबिलिटी क्रिएट होगी। अभी आपको जब बैलेंस करना है तो दैट बैलेंसिंग शुड बी विद द क्लेमिंग ऑफ आईटीसी, with the debit note, that is a record which you have, if any, of any returning of any material or any defective material। और उसके बाद because once you record the invoice, लेट डिडक्शन हो रहा है क्या नहीं, ये प्रिकॉशन लेने के लिए मैं ये चीज इंसिस्ट कर रहा हूं, बिकॉज वंस देयर इज अ लेट डिडक्शन, डेफिनेटली देयर विल बी द इंटरेस्ट ऑफ लेट डिडक्शन। मैं लेट डिडक्शन की बात कर रहा हूं, लेट पेमेंट की नहीं, बिकॉज मोस्ट ऑफ द टाइम एवरी क्लाइंट आर्ग्यूज विद अस दैट वी आर मेकिंग द पेमेंट टाइमली। हाउ कम टाइमली? If you are recording the invoice of July in December and you are paying the TDS liability, discharging the TDS liability of July in January, how are you doing the payment timely is the question that income tax officer going to raise. So late deduction के लिए अगर आपको clarity रखनी है और you want to have the merits in your case, always be clear with the date of booking the invoice in your books of accounts, and you should have the reason why you have recorded it late. Why it is recorded late? Because उसके बाद ही TDS की liability trigger होने वाली है। इसमें काफी उलझने रहती है, इसलिए मैं ये इतना इंसिस्ट कर रहा हूं। Similarly for interest and commission, interest, if I talk about loan agreement, actual payment, बुक्स में हम कैपिटलाइजेशन भी करते, बोरोइंग कॉस्ट एसेट में डाल दी, लायबिलिटी P&L में इंटरेस्ट डालने की जगह एसेट में डाल दिया, तो टीडीएस नहीं काटा तो डिसअलाउंस नहीं होगा। ये गलत फहमी नहीं है, ये डिसएडवांटेज लेते हैं और रिस्क लेते हैं हम लोग just to pamper our client. So sometimes be strict, make him understand, make him literate that भाई कितने तारीख को क्या कर रहे हैं, ये इंपॉर्टेंट है. टीडीएस की लाइबिलिटी आपके बुक्स में कब ट्रिगर होगी, और जिस because when the assessment is going to go process, that time they are going to see your ledgers and the challans and the invoice and the agreements. Then they will be coming to a point, भाई ये कितने तारीख को लोन एग्रीमेंट में लिखा है एवरी मंथ 7 तारीख को 10 तारीख को आपको इंटरेस्ट पे करना है. तो 10 तारीख को इंटरेस्ट पे नहीं भी किया होगा तो इंटरेस्ट की लाइबिलिटी रिकॉग्नाइज करनी जरूरी है बुक्स में. उसी तरह इंटरेस्ट के जैसे पुराने इसमें 194A था, अभी 393 में बुक्स में लाइबिलिटी तो रिकॉग्नाइज करनी पड़ेगी. नहीं की तो लेट डिडक्शन होगा. कमीशन ऑन सेल, ये सारे एरियाज में काफी केस लॉज है, प्रैक्टिकल केसेस है. कंसिडरिंग द टाइम लिमिटेशन, आई एम जस्ट रैपिंग इट. Sometimes later we will be discussing it in the question answer if required. So commission में आपको देखना है कि अगर कोई वर्क ऑर्डर कॉन्ट्रैक्ट उसका पेमेंट का डेट क्या है, इनवॉइस इशू किया होगा, बिकॉज इसमें इंटरेस्ट में जीएसटी नहीं आएगा लेकिन कमीशन में तो आएगा. तो कमीशन में जीएसटी क्या प्रोफॉर्मा इनवॉइस है, डिस्प्यूटेड इशू है, व्हाटएवर थिंग्स आर देयर, व्हाट इज द ट्रिगर पॉइंट यू हैव टू सी. कमीशन कब ट्रिगर होने वाला है, मैंने एग्जांपल सेल का लिया है. इट मे बी ऑफ बाइंग कमीशन, इट मे बी ऑफ एनी सेलिंग और बाइंग प्रॉपर्टी और एनीथिंग. सो यू हैव टू बी क्लियर विद इट ऑफ द P&L आइटम्स. टीडीएस ऑन स्पेशल ट्रांजैक्शन, ये मैंने लिया है प्राइजेस, बिजनेस प्रमोशन की जो एक्टिविटी है जहां पे आप कैश वाउचर्स, प्राइस व्हीकल देते हैं, गोल्ड लोन गोल्ड कॉइन देते हैं या फ्लैट देते हैं. ये सारे आपको रिटेल मार्केट में सारे बम्पर प्राइजेस नाम से मिलेंगे. तो वहां पे टीडीएस डिडक्ट करने के लिए जो स्पेशल प्रोविजन है, सर विल बी टेकिंग अहेड विद इट, बट अगेन रिमेंबर दैट प्रोविजन शुड बी ऑन द डेट ऑफ realization or possession, physical possession of that particular goods in the hands of the winner. ये सारी चीजें वहां पे इंपॉर्टेंट है. यहाँ पे मैंने ट्रिगर पॉइंट अलग अलग लिखे हैं. जैसे अगर व्हीकल देते हो तो जब तक आरटीओ में रजिस्ट्रेशन नहीं हो रहा है फिजिकल देके भी कुछ फायदा नहीं, उसके पहले टीडीएस आपको पे करना पड़ेगा. एंड सर विल बी एक्सप्लेनिंग डिटेल अबाउट ऑल दिस प्रोविजंस. ये काफी रिटेल मार्केट में होलसेल में चलता है ये सारी जो चीजें है, इसलिए अकाउंटिंग और इसका टीडीएस पे करना इक्वली इंपॉर्टेंट है. नहीं तो फिर से यहाँ पे पेनल्टी है, पर्टिकुलरली ये विनिंग ट्रांजैक्शंस जो है ना इसके ऊपर पेनल्टी अलग है, विच इज कवर्ड इन द 468 आई सपोज. जो पहले इसमें नॉन पेमेंट पे पेनल्टी थी वो उसके साथ ये भी पॉइंट कवर किया है दैट इफ इट इज टीडीएस ऑन विनिंग्स और टीडीएस ऑन परक्यूजिट्स वेर इन काइंड दे रहे. सो इन शॉर्ट इन काइंड पे आप दे रहे हो, व्हीकल दे रहे हो या सामने वाले को बेनिफिट दे रहे हो, इन काइंड में पैसा नहीं दे रहे हो, तो आपको वो फिजिकली हैंड ओवर करने के पहले टीडीएस पे करना है. ये प्रोविजन कह रही है. तो बुक्स में उस तरफ से आपको लाइबिलिटी बुक करके पे करना है. इनटेंजिबल एसेट्स, इनटेंजिबल एसेट्स दिखाई नहीं देते, ये लास्ट मोमेंट पे एडजस्टमेंट आ जाती है. प्रॉफिट, it is I cannot keep all this on the record, but it is to be understood that the adjustment of profit can be backfired because TDS on asset or TDS on revenue items, it is irrespective. TDS is TDS. वो आप एसेट में रिकॉर्ड कर रहे हो या अकाउंटिंग प्रिंसिपल है, वो आप P&L में डाल रहे हो आपको, ये आपका अकाउंटिंग प्रिंसिपल है. तो इंटेंजिबल में दो टाइप के इंटेंजिबल एसेट्स है. फॉर एग्जांपल इफ यू टॉक अबाउट आईपीआर होंगे, तो आईपीआर में आप प्रोफेशनल को फीस दे रहे हो, तो फीस दे रहे हो उस दिन आप उसका अमाउंट पे कर रहे हो, इनवॉइस ले रहे हो, तो आपको टीडीएस डिडक्ट करना है, बुक्स में लाइबिलिटी रिकॉर्ड करना है. इफ इट इज नॉट, then again you have to see what is the accounting policy they have followed. For example, most of the time brand development नाम से एक अकाउंट क्रिएट होता है और उसके अंडर जो भी एडवर्टाइजमेंट का खर्चा है that is capitalized considering AS 26 अकाउंटिंग स्टैंडर्ड 26. तो वो को रिलेट करके आपको डेट फिक्स करनी है, which is the date on which you are going to deduct the tax in the books of accounts and then pay the liability. Because there are many times disputes or there are many multiple opinions in with the clients and that becomes confusing. पहले वो सारे एडवर्टाइजमेंट एक्सपेंसेस P&L में आते हैं और फिर वो कैपिटलाइज होते हैं, तो कैपिटलाइज करना है तो फिर टीडीएस क्यों काटना है, ऐसे कुछ मिसकंसेप्ट्स मिथ्स दिमाग में रहते हैं, तो वो थोड़ा उनसे उनके दिमाग से निकालना जरूरी है, नहीं तो वहां पे टीडीएस का डिफॉल्ट हो जाएगा. So this slide is just I'm covering the different aspect of intangible asset which are recorded in the books of accounts and for which TDS applicability is by default, but you have to be very clear about recognizing that expenses and अल्ट्रेशन वहां पे भी नहीं करना है. बीच में वो एडवर्टाइजमेंट एक्सपेंस को निकाल के अपने एसेट में डाल दिया, एसेट में से निकाल के फिर से P&L में डाल दिया, ये चीजें नहीं होनी चाहिए. ये आपको ध्यान रखना है एज अ tax professionals and advice to the client. This was the last slide. Without taking your extra time, I've tried to cover it so that my friend Shravan sir is waiting for his batting. तो मैं उनका वक्त ग्रैब नहीं करूंगा, एनक्रोच नहीं करूंगा और कुछ I think question answers at the end. So with this, I thanks for your patience listening, and I've tried to share the maximum practical aspects here. Thank you very much. I hand over to Pranav sir.
Thank you so much, sir. I'm sure everyone will agree that the session was highly informative, practical, and filled with the valuable professional insights, right? So, friends, I'm once again thank you to all of you to giving us an overwhelming response. That is, 462 members are registered for this session today, out of which some are online here and some are joining in live session on YouTube. Thanks again so much. Friends, we once again express our appreciation with a big round of applause. Ladies and gentlemen, we shall now break for a tea. Kindly reassemble in the hall by 40 p.m. sharp, as our second technical session will begin immediately thereafter. Thank you. After a tea break, we are reassemble here. 5 minutes. Break. Oh. Hello, good evening, everybody. Welcome back. I hope all our delegates in a hall have enjoyed their refreshments, and I also welcome back our participant who continue to stay connected with us through Zoom and YouTube Live. Thank you for enthusiastic participation. We now move to the next technical session. Before that, I have some interesting announcement for you. Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention for just 2 minutes. Let me ask you a simple question. How many of you genuinely believe that learning should never stop? Any answer? Please reply in chat. Hello, I am audible? हे कर्सर चालत नाहीये रिस्पॉन्स तो बघू नका येते रिस्पॉन्स बघू एखादा रिस्पॉन्स चालतच नाहीये Yes, everyone agree with me. Absolutely, because in today's ever-changing tax environment, the biggest risk is not to paying tax. The biggest risk is not updating yourself, and that is exactly why our association has once again bought something truly special for every tax professional. After the tremendous success of last year initiative, I'm extremely happy to announce MTPS Golden EduPass 2026-27. Friends, this is not just another course. It is your passport to an entire year of your professional learning. Imagine getting access to 10 premium courses, 14 study circle meetings, recordings of missed sessions, expert faculty, practical case-based learning, programs in both English and regional language, and even a yearly subscription to Tax Tribune, all through a single enrollment. And do you know the best part? The total value of this program is approximately more than 20,000, but through the Golden EduPass, members can enjoy saving up to 12,000. Now, that's not an expense. That's an investment in your professional future. But remember, every great opportunity comes with a deadline, right? The super early bird offer is available only till 31st July 2026, followed by the early bird offer till 15th August 2026. So don't wait until the last day. Register yourself today. I request every member present here on virtually or physically, don't just attend programs, build your professional journey. Contact the respective persons. We already share the flyer and contact numbers of the persons. Let us continue our tradition of learning, growing, and leading together. Thank you. And let us give big round of applause to Team MTPA for bringing yet another value pack initiative for all our members. Now I request our dignitaries to come with our second faculty, C.H. Shravan Suratwala, on the dais. Be comfortable, sir. Our next session topic is Decode Section 393, new TDS on payment to resident. It is my honor to introduce our next distinguished faculty, C.A. Shravan Suratwala, a practicing chartered accountant and partner at S.M. Suratwala and Company. He brings over 10 years of rich post-qualification experience in corporate and international taxation, tax litigation, advisory, and compliance, along with the significant expertise in internal audit. He holds a diploma in IFRS from ACCA, UK, and is certified by ICAI in artificial intelligence and goods and service tax. He is an active member of ICAI Central Council AI Committee, the WIRC Direct and International Tax and FEMA Committee, and the Direct Tax Committee of MCCIA. His blend of technical expertise and practical insights make him highly respected speaker among the professionals. Friends, please join me in extending a warm welcome to C.A. Shravan Suratwala. Now I request our President, Advocate Aniruddha Chavan sir, to kindly felicitate our respected faculty. Thank you, sir. Without further delay, I request C.A. Shravan Suratwala to kindly take over the sessions. Sir, over to you.
Welcome everybody to today's second session. First of all, I would really like to thank the committee of MTPA for inviting me to this prestigious conclave. The first session as all of you, must have attended, was a fantastic session by Parikshit ji and has made my job much, much, much easier. Him explaining the basics of TDS and especially the new TDS scheme under the new act. Giving an overview of these sections. So that saves a lot of time for me. And so without any ado, as it's 5:10 and I'm sure we would also like to keep a good few minutes for Q&A. Let's start the session, right? So what has changed under the new act and the new rules, right? What is the new scheme of TDS provisions? Of course, we're going to discuss TDS for residents, which includes our employees as well as our general payments to other resident vendors and the reporting requirements under the new law. And of course, certain key takeaways, because all this somewhere down the line, we should figure out and we should devise and ensure that certain products come out of these discussions. Because if you're adding value, I feel we should also get properly compensated for it. Our advice should be taken seriously, and for that, our clients need to realize that it does not come it comes at some premium,
and everything does not form a part of our routine advisory, right? Now, in terms of new act and the new rules, what has changed? Most importantly is that all the sections have been realigned and renumbered. That's one of the most important changes that has happened. What the department has done is they have tried to ensure that a certain TDS provision regarding a certain transaction or any provision regarding to a certain transaction are at the same place. So that's why there is a bit of realignment and renumbering of sections. Now you don't have 200-word sentences and 5 to 6 paras. Everything is tabulated and is formula based. All the provisos and explanations have now sort of been integrated as subsections. So that removes all litigation around whether a proviso or an explanation expands the section, restricts the sections, right? So that litigation sort of now goes away with the new act. As we discussed, tabular formats and formulae have replaced long sentences. Of course, all this has led to renumbering of forms and certain additional disclosures in those forms as deemed fit by the government. And I mean, there is no policy change. And one thing all of us need to keep in mind is that all our rights and obligations under the new act vis-a-vis the old act remains the same. So if any demand was payable under the old act, it does not go away under the new act. Similarly, if anything was receivable from the government under the old act, that does not go in the new act, right? Now coming to specific chapter of TDS, now it's covered by chapter 19. And earlier we had almost 30 plus sections in relation to TDS. Now all that has been compressed to a mere 12 to 15 sections. And all these sections are sort of arranged very neatly so that there is no confusion per se, and any common person who's probably not very well versed with tax also can go and read the sections and at least come to a prima facie conclusion that, okay, this is applicable, this is not applicable, right? So in terms of summarizing for today's discussion, 4 sections are going to be of utmost importance. The first one is section 392, which is salary TDS. Apart from salary TDS, all other TDS sections have been clubbed under section 393 under various tables, correct? So even section for no TDS, so for cases where we do not need to deduct TDS, which was erstwhile in section 197A and 196, are now moved to section 393. Then we have section 400. Then we have section 400. This is a new addition to the income tax regulation, which basically states that any new circular, FAQ or notification issued by the government is now binding on the tax deductor or tax collector. Erstwhile, the position has been that in case any circular notification issued by the government, the assessee is not liable to follow that. Only the tax department is liable to follow that. However, specifically for the tax, for the chapter of TDS, there is a specific section, a new section, section 400, which states that all the FAQ circular issued by the government now will be also binding on the tax deductor and the tax collector. I mean, of course, if we have seen in the last 5 to 6 years, wherever a new TDS section has been introduced, post the introduction in the union budget, there have been a lot of circulars, FAQs, notifications issued by the tax department to give clarity on the nature, on how it is to be done, what are the examples in the same, right? So we had payment of goods where on TDS on purchase of goods, where we had a couple of notifications, detailed notifications and FAQs. Similarly, for benefits and perquisites, we had these documents issued. So now all those circulars and notifications, of course, prospectively, not the old ones, but will be binding on the tax deductor and the collector, right? And section 402, again, a very interesting addition to the overall scheme of TDS. Like we have section 2 for the Income Tax Act, which defines all the terms provided under the Income Tax Act. We have section 402, where all the definitions and all the common parts of the TDS definitions are now under section 402. So why is it important, right? Why is it important to follow these provisions? Of course, this is going to be covered tomorrow, but just to give an overview, first of all, is of course being an assessee in default. correct? So 1%, 1.5% of interest for non-deduction, non-payment, that stays, only the section number changes. Disallowance of 30% expense in terms of my payment to resident, it's 100% when it comes to non-resident. Penalty for not furnishing Form 15 CSAB, again, this is in the context of my non-resident payments where the penalty is up to 1 lakh rupees per incident, right? Again, furnishing of incorrect reports and certificates, which is up to 10,000. This is also applicable to tax practitioners and chartered accountants. Late filing fee of 200 rupees per day. This continues. And of course, penalty for misreporting and delayed filing under the TDS return continues under section 461. Correct. Now, with this background, let's start with TDS on salaries. And again, a very interesting section over here. To understand TDS on salaries, first we need to understand how my salary income works, because for salaries and for non-resident payments, these are the only two TDS sections where the deductor is responsible to first find out tax liability of my pay and then compute TDS. Vis-a-vis the other sections where I have a gross rate, a threshold limit, and I have to deduct TDS on the transaction value. But on salaries, you have to first compute the salary income of my employee as per the provisions of the Income Tax Act, and then use slab rates to deduct TDS, right? So to understand TDS on salary, we have to really understand what are the changes done under the heads of salary and related rules and forms to correctly compute TDS on salaries. Of course, the first rule remains the same. This is a key principle rule that the payment which we are making should be under an employee and employee relationship. This is some piece of information we take for granted whenever we see accounts of our employee, that if anything is clubbed as salary, we assume that there will be an employer-employee relationship and sort of then go on to determine my TDS liability. Say, for example, if I'm going through books of accounts and if I see that there is a payment of 6 lakhs to a particular individual and the client tells me it's for salary, do we really go and check whether that does, whether it completes the test of this employer-employee, or whether somebody can say, no, it's not employer-employee, but it's principal to principal transaction covered under section 194J as a professional payment, right? So this test is very important. Today, Income Tax Department is going to come and question that how this is not professional fee and how this is employer-employee, whereas the Provident Fund or the labor law guys are going to come to you and categorize it the other way, that why this is not employer-employee and professional fee, right? So a lot of clients, to avoid labor law compliances, also keep employees on a consultancy basis. So over there, we have to check the underlying documentation and see that whether it's going in the employer-employee category or whether it's going in the principal to principal category, right? Then again, from a policy change, as we discussed, there is no change in the scheme of TDS computation, right? So we have to compute salary as per section 15 to 19, along with all our exemptions, reductions, our house property loss is to be considered. If any other income is there, that needs to be considered, right? So all those principles which were applicable under the Income Tax 1961 Act and rules remain the same under the 2025 Act and the rules as well, correct? Now, of course, the key changes that have happened are under the income tax rules, which have impacted my allowances and my perquisites. So it's important that on a documentation level, all these revised amounts, revised limits, and the facilities that we are, or a perquisites we are giving to the employee, are covered as under the CTC or covered in the employment agreement. That is the first step that we need to see. Correct? With this background, let's discuss the changes under the Act, rules, and forms. So the definition of salary again remains the same, where under the first subclause, again, the section number is changed under the new Act as well. So the first clause is in terms of any salary due. This is basically salary on accrual basis. So if it is any salary due, it will be considered as a taxable salary and TDS needs to be done. Similarly, any advance salary, whether due or not, that is whether any salary paid or allowed in the tax year, correct, through current employer or former employer, whether it was due or not, that is advance salary, will also become taxable and has to be a part of the computation of TDS. And the third is any arrears of salary, typically, applicable in case of government organizations where they have their pay commissions and salary for the last 5 or 6 years sort of gets credited in a particular year. In that case, If TDS not has been done, then even that needs to be considered as a part of the salary. Again, as similar to the earlier law, remuneration by whatever name called paid to a partner of a LLP or a partnership firm will not be under this head. It will be taxable under section 194J and not this section. Correct. One very interesting stray ruling of Gujarat High Court over here is that if an employee waives their salary, whether TDS needs to be done or whether it is taxable or not. Now, where Gujarat High Court has in the case of the individual employee has said that no, it is of course taxable because it was due. But for TDS purposes, this won't matter because TDS on salary is on payment basis, right? So only when you pay your salary, you have to deduct TDS. But from an employee perspective, the moment the salary becomes due, it is taxable it is taxable under the Income Tax Act. Correct? Now, earlier, we had only 3 sections for salary income taxation. One was section 15, which was a charging section that we saw above. And then we had a definition section where the definition of salaries, perquisites, and profit in lieu of salary was sort of clubbed under section 17. Now, under the new act, it is split into 3 subsections. And that's why the renumbering changes happened. And deduction of salaries was under section 16 earlier, now forms a part of section 19. Now, there has been a small change in the definitions of deductions and profit in lieu of salary. This is mainly on account of gratuity, commutation pension, and retrenchment compensation. So these earlier formed a part of my exempt income, right? But now, sort of to keep a better track of these items, what has happened is that they have been included in the definition of profits in lieu of salary and also in the definition of deductions from salary, right? So your numbers might not change, but the reporting of these items will change because now you have to show it under profits in lieu of salary while you are filing the quarter four TDS return and for generation of Form 16. And you have to also report it in deductions from salaries. Earlier, the reporting was in exemptions, right? Similarly, now your exemptions which were a part of section 10 earlier, which is your house rent allowance, your education allowance, your leave travel allowance, now are under section 11. Right? Now, keeping in mind the objective of the act, if you go and see section 11, it is just a 1-pager section and all the line by line items are mentioned in the schedules. So there are 8 schedules to section 11. So you will find all these items very well classified under the schedules, right? Another change that has happened is the entertainment allowance, which was a deduction, which was given to government employees, now has been removed. And so there is no basically added benefit of that 2,500 rupees of entertainment allowance to government employees. So these are the changes that have happened under the act. Correct? Now some definitions. Now in terms of definitions, again, there is no change. The definition of salary under section 16 remains the same, where you have basic, DA, you have bonus, and then you have every allowance that by any name whatsoever you want to give to the employee. All the monetary allowances will form a part of definition of salaries under section 16, right? Similarly, the definition of perquisites again has remained the same under section 17. So all your non-monetary perquisites, non-monetary benefits given to your employees will be under the definition of perquisites. Your ESOPs, your provision of car and driver, your rent-free accommodation, contribution to funds over and above the 12.5%, any loan or amenity given over and above the perquisite valuation rules, gifts, etc. Right? Similarly, definition of profits in lieu of salary have, as we discussed, has gone and undergone a slight change where now your gratuity, etc., termination benefits are now included over here. This is nothing basically but a monetary part, but these are one time. These are not recurring like your regular salary and allowances, right? And deductions from salary again remain the same. Profession tax, your standard deduction, your gratuity, pension, and retrenchment compensation. So these are the basically types of items gets covered under each category. Now this is important because your reporting depends on the type of benefit you are giving employee. So of course, my profits in lieu of salary is also going to be a taxable income. My salaries like my basic or transport allowance is also going to be my taxable income. I have to show everything gross first and then deduct my allowance, my exempt income and my deductions from the salary, right? So your calculation might not change for salary TDS, but your disclosure will undergo a change when you file your Q4 return. Again, under the old scheme, of course, all the deductions under chapter 6A earlier, now under chapter 8 remain the same. There is only a change in section numbers. So basically all your common deductions like PPF, LIC, pension, housing fund, which were a part of 80C, 80CCC, now go under section 123 with schedule 15. Again, instead of giving a long list in the section only, they have created a schedule which they can amend. Right. Similarly, your employer's pension scheme under 80CC22, which is also under the new regime, is now section 124. The limit of 150 plus 50 remains the same. Your health insurance premium under section 80D, which is 20,000, 50,000, 5,000 for medical checkup, limit again remains the same as now under section 126. Right. So basically, all the deductions over here, the amounts are the same, the conditions are the same, only the section number has changed. Right. Now, these were the changes under the Income Tax Act. Now, coming to changes in forms and rules. Now, your old Form 16 now becomes Form 30. Earlier, there were only two parts to Form 16, Part A and Part B. Now, what they have done is essentially they have split Part A into Part A and Part B, which is your details of employer, employee, and details of amounts paid and TDS, which is nothing but your mirror of 26 years. And they have introduced a Part C where my actual Part B, which was there initially. So current Part B will become Part C, where my details of all my salaries, my components, my deductions, exemptions, my tax paid will be computed. Another addition over here is now you have a separate form under Part C only when an employer is reporting pension for senior citizens. So this is a change under Form 130. Form 12B becomes Form 122. Again, there is no change, but this form is one of the most ignored forms by all the employers. Whenever a new employee is joining, it is sort of mandatory to take this form where you take details of your previous salary and TDS for the new joinee, and you include those amounts in your current salary TDS computation. Otherwise, when there is a change in job, I mean, we've more often than not seen that the employee unfortunately pays tax at the end of the year with interest, because both employers have computed the salary by considering the slabs, right? So on the initial amount and even on the subsequent amounts, the slab has been sort of computed twice, right? So this is a very important form. This can be a part of your joining checklist. Form 12BA, which is Form 123. This is a detailed form showing taxable perquisites benefits paid to employees. So if you are giving any perquisite to employee, say for example, ESOPs, which is taxable, you need to issue this form to the employee along with your Form 16. Even currently Form 12BA, even for our individual clients who are salaried and they are receiving any perquisite, we have to also obtain Form 12BA from them to check what kind of perquisite they are receiving. Form 12BB is basically an employee declaration form, which is now Form 124, basically for HRA. And one change in this form is that now you have to disclose your relationship with the landlord. So all the arrangements basically between family members, that I am paying rent to my mother or father to save on that tax. So that now relationship has to be mandatorily disclosed in this form. Form 24Q sort of becomes Form 138, where I have to file my quarterly TDS returns. This will be the first quarter of TDS returns, and the forms, the utilities are now being released. So this will be the first Form 138 that anybody files in this quarter. My AIS, which is my 26 AS becomes Form 168 for employee. And my payment code for salary for a non-government employee is from 92B has been changed to 1002. So I'm sure the last point has, of course, been implemented by everybody right now, because now the third month of payment. Now coming to what changes are there in income tax rules in terms of my allowances, right? Now all these are actionables from our end, and this is a product from our end to the client. It's a service offering from our client, right? Now coming to HRA. Earlier HRA was a part of Section 10, but now it forms a part of Section 11, which takes me to Schedule 3. And in that Schedule 3, I have a table. And in that table, serial number 11 forms HRA. Now these rules, now this HRA allowance has to be computed with Rule 279 under the Income Tax Rules 2026, correct? Again, the computation mechanism remains the same. One change that has happened is that 4 new cities have been added to the 50% bracket. So Hyderabad, Pune, Ahmedabad, and Bengaluru. These are the 4 cities which have where my 50% of the salary, 40% of my salary city allowance has been increased to 50%. Correct? Now there is a dual change over here because you have to also keep in mind salary for this purpose is basic plus DA, right? And as per the new labor codes, all of us have to ensure that the basic salary is 50% of my CTC as per the new labor codes. So if your employer is giving a 30% or a 40% basic salary out for your total CTC, this change has to be communicated to them, and that CTC has to be corrected and has to be in line with the new labor codes. So as sort of Parikshit ji had given a list of laws to be followed while or kept in mind while doing TDS provisions. So the labor laws also forms a part of that list and should ensure that your CTC offered to the employees by your employer comply with the latest labor regulations. So while computing HRA for now 26-27, the HRA amount will change on 2 aspects. One is the 10% increase. So if the current if the current basic is 40%, so that is going to increase by 10%, which and moreover that for employees staying in these cities, Hyderabad, Pune, Ahmedabad and Bengaluru, another increase of 10% due to this rule change is going to happen, right? So there is a good chance if somebody is claiming a lot of allowances under the old tax regime, the HRA deduction is going to increase. So as we discussed, there is a mandatory relationship disclosure in the form that now employees must explicitly disclose their relationship with the landlord, correct? This is basically to tighten scrutiny on rent paid to family members. The landlord PAN requirement remains the same, that where the rent exceeds 1 lakh rupees, the employer needs to collect the PAN of the landlord, and of course rent receipts and rent agreements also need to be connected for adequate documentation. HRA benefit is of course available unfortunately only under the old tax regime. A couple of issues here that I just want to discuss is that one is that can I claim HRA if I rent a house in the same city where I own a house, right? For example, I am staying in Hinjewadi, but my new employer is in Kharadi. So I am not going to travel 1.5 hours every day. So what I do is, though I own a house in Hinjewadi, I will rent a house in Kharadi and claim HRA for that. Whether I can do that? Yes, there is no specific restriction on this. One can do that. Now, taking this example forward, can I say that I'll also claim the deduction of loan principal payment and interest payment on housing loan if I'm claiming HRA? Again, there is no specific restriction on this. If the case is genuine, the loan principal payment can be claimed as a deduction under Section 80C, and the interest on housing loan can be claimed as house property loss in return, even if you are claiming an HRA in the same city. Can HRA be claimed by an NRI employee? A classic example is that my Indian employer has given me work from home. So I stay 3 months in Bali, 3 months in somewhere in Indonesia, 3 months in Thailand, and I only stay a couple of months in India, right? So in that case, if I am complying with the criteria of HRA, saying that I have a rent agreement, I am paying it to some landlord, I'm not staying in a hotel, but I'm renting a property outside India. In that case, whether an NRI employee can claim HRA, this is not litigated. There is no precedent for this, but there is also no restriction under the Act. The Act never says that only a resident employee can claim HRA, or HRA can be claimed only for a property situated in India, right? So this is a gray area, and if any of your clients sort of are in this situation, you definitely can explore claiming HRA, because rent paid outside India is going to be substantially higher. So coming to other allowances under Section 11, again serial number 13 plus Rule 280. So all my other allowances are in now Rule 280, my children education allowance, my hostel allowance, my transport system allowance, my physically challenged transport system allowance, underground allowance, all these have gone a significant change in their limits, right? So for children education allowance, it was earlier just 100 rupees per month per child. Now they have made it 30 times and taken it to 3,000 rupees per month per child. So my additional deduction or additional benefit I can get is almost 70,000 rupees. And if you're in the higher 30% bracket, that is almost 15 to 20,000 rupees of tax saved. Similarly, for children, hostel and expenditure allowance, an additional benefit of 2 lakh rupees per month. So 9,000 rupees per month per child. So there is a substantial increase in the amounts of allowances, tax-free allowances given now to employees. And it's very important as tax practitioners and as consultants to advise our clients to have a relook at the CTC. And even though they might be doing TDS under the new regime, but as a part of CTC, these amounts should be changed and updated as per the Income Tax Act. Correct? Now, out of all these, this list of allowances, transport allowance was physically challenged. This is the only allowance which is available both under the new tax regime as well as old tax regime. So if you have a physically challenged employee and they are, even though they are in the new tax regime, they can claim this allowance. So allowance, of course, in respect of my children can be claimed maximum for 2 children, and education is up to class 12. Higher education is not allowed. There is a separate allowance for deduction for that under section 80E erstwhile. Correct? In terms for children education allowance, you don't need to give any additional proof apart from the fact that you have children. That's it. But for other allowances, relevant documentation should be collected by the employer. Like for example, for children hostel expenditure allowance, you have to ensure that the children of the employee are indeed in a hostel, staying in a hostel to claim that deduction. Similarly, for transport allowance for physically challenged, a disability certificate or something of that sort has to be collected from the employee. Now, in terms for education allowance, a couple of questions is that whether I can claim education allowance as well as tuition fee under section 80C. Yes, I can do that. There is no restriction saying that if you are claiming education allowance as a part of your salary taxation, you cannot claim deduction under section 80C for tuition fee. Both can be claimed simultaneously. Whether both parents can claim the deduction, if the education fee, if the fee of the child is more than this amount, more than the deduction amount, then 100% both parents can claim the deduction. Right? So now there is one open issue under section rule 80. It's a very technical issue. I'm sure down the road, the government will correct this. Usually what happens is that now the default regime is new regime, right? And if you opt for the old and default regime being new regime, these deductions and exemptions are sort of not applicable. Only a very select deductions and exemptions new employees in the new regime can take, which is very limited, right? But if you opt to be in the old regime, ideally all these deductions and exemptions should be applicable for TDS computation or for taxability of that salary income. Now, how to opt for that old regime is to exercise option under section 2024. Now, the rule 283 states, unfortunately states that if you opt for the old regime, only those limited deductions will be given to you. It should be the other way around, saying that an employee who being an assessee who has exercised option under section 2024 shall be entitled to all the exemptions given in table under rule 280. But unfortunately, it's been worded the other way around. So let's hope the government corrects this. But it should be there on the back of your mind that this is the current status quo regarding the law, and there could be some litigation probably in future in this aspect. Now we come to the next rule, which is rule 278, which talks about my leave travel concession. Only two changes here. I'm sorry, I'm rushing through the slides because we have limited time and we have to also cover the resident taxation. So leave travel concession, only 2 changes. Now air travel is not linked to economy fare of the national carrier. Now if an employee is eligible for business class travel, the entire amount can be claimed under leave travel concession, economy, business, whatever the employee is entitled to, that amount can be claimed. Similarly, for Bus travel, earlier it was linked to the AC first class. Now you have a computation mechanism of 30 rupees per kilometer. Again, LTA is only allowed under the old regime. Meal perquisite, again, very interesting one. This is, I think, one of the most useful changes that has happened that now, right? So now we are done with sort of allowances. Now we are coming to perquisite. So allowance was that, okay, this much amount is going to be paid. And as per the rule, this amount is exempt, right? Now coming to perquisite, we have to realize that nothing is being paid. Now, these are the facilities given by the employer to the employees, correct? So in case earlier, if free food above 50 rupees was given to an employee, ideally the value of that food was added as a taxable perquisite. But now this amount of 50 rupees has been increased to 200 rupees. So there is an additional benefit of 72,000 rupees. So if your employer is giving you food facility or giving you a food card or a meal card, right? Up to 96,000 rupees, it is tax exempt. Only if it crosses 96,000 rupees, the amount will be added to your taxable salary. Now, it is one thing is important that meal perquisite is not equal to meal allowance. If a meal allowance is given as a cash payout, it will be completely taxable, and this benefit is not available. Correct? Meal is not defined, so your regular breakfast, lunch, supper, or dinner should be considered as meal. It is important that tea and snacks provided are not to be considered in the above limit. There is no limit for tea and snacks, and whatever amount of tea and snacks you give, they will not be added to your taxable income. Loan perquisite, earlier the limit was just 20,000. Now it has been increased to 2 lakh rupees, right? So if an employer is giving an interest-free loan of up to 2 lakh rupees to the employee, there is no need to compute notional interest on that and add it as a taxable value. Earlier that was the case, but only if the loan above is about 2 lakh, then only the interest amount will be, the notional interest will be considered as a perquisite value. Car perquisite, again, part A scenario is where the employer is providing you car and the expenses are also being borne by the employer. In that case, the amounts have been significantly increased, and this has led to the increase in my taxable value of salary, right? As shown in the table again. So if you have a sort of a big car, it's almost 10,000 rupees per month. Otherwise, it's 8,000 rupees per month, depending on what car you have. So this has led to an increase in my taxable value. So we have to review this, and we have to ensure that these amounts are being considered as a part of my taxable salary. Part B is where it is an employee's car and the expense is borne by the employer, right? In that case, it's the opposite, where first I have to find out what is the expense incurred by the employer and then reduce these amounts, right? So 1 lakh rupees is, say, for example, incurred by my employer as routine maintenance expenses for your insurance, petrol, servicing. So that is 1 lakh rupees, and then 5 into 3,000, say, for example, 8,000 into 12, correct? 96,000. I have to reduce it. So only 4,000 will be my taxable perquisite. This has led to a decrease in perquisite. One situation not covered here is it is an employee's car and even the expenses are borne by employee, but are then reimbursed from the employer. In that case, these tables will not work. We have to see that whether that expense was for an official use or a personal use, and accordingly my perquisite valuation will have to be done. Correct? Value of gift perquisite. So any gift given to employee was sort of earlier considered as taxable if the amount exceeded 5,000 rupees. Now this has been increased to 15,000 rupees. Correct? In case the threshold exceeds, the entire amount has to be considered as gift and not only the exceeding amount. And this will include everything: your Diwali gift, anniversary gift, any winning prize in the tournament. Correct? All these sort of will be considered as a gift perquisite only. Office trip a gift? No. If only employees are going and not only a select employee, say for example, if you win an office trip in a competition, then that will be considered as gift. But in case everybody is going, or as per the office policy, a particular designation are going, then it might not be fall under gift perquisite. Correct? Now, what is the way forward for us? As I said initially, that this is a product for us. Correct? We can pitch for salary structuring of our clients. We can pitch for review of CTC and employment letters from a labor law and income tax perspective also. So we have to ensure that they comply with the latest labor laws and their CTC is updated, and the components in the CTC and the salary structure are updated as per the new Income Tax Act. Correct? Of course, now that the limits under the old regime and the benefits under old regime have gone up, so old versus new tax regime has to be done at the start of the year and at the end of the year also for us, because accordingly my taxability will get decided. Review TDS working of employer clients, of course, we do that, and this is going to be an outcome of the first 2 points. Whether all these, of course, changes have been incorporated in ERPs, because all your salary slips, CTC, etc., is now maintained in software. So you have to ensure that they are updated. And in particular, during audit or during your scrutiny, what you have to do is you have to check staff welfare expenses, rent expenses, entertainment expenses, traveling expenses, because usually all your perquisites and employee related expenses will lie in one of these things. Like, for example, in a lot of our clients, when we are scrutinizing rent expenses, we get to know that they have hired an employee and they're paying for his or her rent accommodation, right? Then that needs to be added as a rent-free accommodation in their TDS working. Similarly, your trips and your gift will form a part of your entertainment and traveling expenses, right? Your staff welfare, for example, some donation has been made to your staffs. Say, for example, not very well-to-do staff, and you want to sponsor their kids' education, right? So you pay directly their education fee, or you pay some hospital fee. So in that case, you have to see whether it's fitting in the bracket of perquisite and decide on taxability accordingly. So scrutiny of these expenses will bring out a lot of these issue items. Correct? Now coming to TDS on resident payments. This is now covered by section 393, and it essentially has, in total, it has 10 subsections. But for us, for today's discussions, the most important the most important is section 393(1), section 393(3). These are the 2 sections that we're going to discuss today. The first 3 subsections talk about where you need to deduct TDS. Correct? And the remaining 3 subsections talk about where I do not need to deduct TDS. Right? So the first subsection talks about TDS for payments to residents. The second subsection talks about TDS for payments to non-residents. Right? In the first subsection, you will have your 194 I, J, C, Q, etc. payments. In subsection 2, you will have your payment made to non-resident artists, sportsmen, your 194 LCLD interest, right? Your 195 payments, your interest payments to non-residents, right? Subsection 3 is irrespective of the residential status of the receiver of the income or the sum. So you have your lottery winnings, crossword, online games, horse races, and even partner payments are covered under section 393. So it's important that when you are making payment to a non-resident partner, it will not get covered under subsection 2, but it will get covered under subsection 3. Coming to subsection 4, no TDS at source basis type of payment, right? Now, there are these certain types of payments, like you have compulsory acquisition of land under specified acts, certain interest on specified bonds, interest on motor accident tribunal claims up to 50,000 rupees. This is a new addition. That's why I've highlighted it. Personal payments for personal 194J payments or 194C payments, right? Certain threshold limits like dividend to individual up to 10,000 rupees. All these form a part of section 393 subsection 4. 393 subsection 5, it talks about no TDS basis type of receiver. So while you are making payments to government or RBI or certain specified corporations, correct? In that case, you don't need to deduct TDS. That is covered in subsection 5. And subsection 6 is covered no TDS basis submission of forms by resident individual, right? So if you're a resident individual and you are submitting Form 15G and Form 15F, which is now Form 121 under the new Act, to your to say your bankers, in that case they will not deduct TDS, right? So that is covered under that is covered under 393 subsection 6, right? So from a structure perspective, you have 3 subsections which deal with where you have to deduct TDS, and there are 3 subsections where you do not need to deduct TDS. Under all these subsections, everything is tabularized. Now, if we look at the structure of every TDS section under the earlier act, the first paragraph was always who's the deductor, who's the deductee, what is the nature, and the timing and the rate. Correct? So any person not being an individual or an HUF responsible for making a payment to a resident some by way of, say, for example, works contract or professional fees, royalties, right? At the time of credit or payment, whichever is earlier, right? An amount equal to 10% of such sum needs to be deducted. In the second paragraph was for threshold, that provided that no deduction shall be made unless the amounts or the aggregate of amounts under this section cross 50,000 rupees or 1 lakh rupees or 30,000 rupees. Correct. Then there was a third para which stated that provided if an individual HUF exceeds my 50 lakh or 1 crore threshold limit for business or profession, then they also need to deduct. So you have a deductor inclusion now. And the fourth para used to be an explanation where all the terms above. So you have the definition of works contract, you have the definition of royalty, you have the definition of FTS. All the definition used to be given in the fourth paragraph. Now, this was a recurring theme which was making the entire TDS chapter very lengthy. So what the government did was they just clubbed the common portion into a heading and then they gave a table below instead of repeating everything again. So if you look at section 393(1), right, where any income or sum, right, of the nature specified in column B. So now your nature, your type of payment is given in column B, distributed by the person in column C. So now who's the payer? Who's making the payment? Whether individual, whether HUF, whether any person, right? That is now given in column C. So now you have the deductor, you have the deductee, and the nature. Shall deduct income tax as under. And then they gave 3 subclauses, where subclause A says that they should deduct TDS on the entire amount of such income or sum, where the amount or aggregate of amounts exceeds the threshold limit in column D. So now they are saying, now you look at the threshold limit in column D. If it's exceeded, right, then you deduct on the entire amount as per the rate also given in column D. When payment or credit, whichever is earlier, and subclause D subject to provisions of subsection 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Correct? So under the main section, you have the deductor, deductee, and the nature. Then under subclause A, you have the threshold under column D. Similarly, in column D, you have the rate. C is timing, which is payment or credit, whichever is earlier for all our sections except for salary. Correct? And subject to the provisions of the other subsections of this section. So this is now the table that is given, right? So you have commission and brokerage, which is the nature of sum. You have the payer over here in column C, where any person or any specified person, right? Person other than specified person, again specified person. So instead of mentioning over here individual, HUF, firm, firm, AOP, company, etc., they have mentioned any person or specified person. And they have defined specified person. We'll come to that. And then in column D, they have mentioned that, say, for example, commission or brokerage. So first is not relevant for us. If you look at subclause 2 of commission, you have rate of 2%, threshold is 20%. If you come to rent, any income by way of rent, person other than specified person, rate is 2%, threshold limit is 50,000 for a month or a part of a month. And again, similarly, any income by way of rent, specified person, 2% for the use of machinery, plant, 10% for the use of land, factory, building. Okay. Now, what is specified person? What is person other than specified person? They have defined under section 402. We discussed initially in the scheme of TDS sections that everything is defined under section 402 for the chapter of TDS. Correct? So now who is a specified person? Individual HUF where their business turnover is more than 1 crore or 50 lakhs in the preceding year. Correct? Any person is any person defined under the act, whether HUF, etc., etc., etc. Correct? Person other than any person and specified person. Say, for example, if we take example of rent, in the first clause, person other than specified person, this is for your individual, right? If I'm an individual and if I'm paying rent of more than 50,000 to my resident landlord, right? I have to deduct TDS. I don't need a TAN, but I have to deduct TDS and file a return, annual return. Correct? Whereas the second subsection is for everybody else. Your business, say 2% for machinery and 10% for my land building and factory building. Right? So all your definitions which are there under section 393 for the terms used under section 393 now will be given under section 402. right? Designated person. Now, designated person, this term is used for contractor payments, right? Which was there in under section 194C, which means government, local authorities, corporation, trust, etc., etc. Similarly, who's the buyer for TDS on goods? Who's the buyer is defined under section 402, that if my turnover limit is 10 crore rupees, then only that section will be applicable to me. Correct? Similarly, all definition of my royalty, what is FTS, what is rent, what is work, etc., everything which was there in those respective sections earlier. So work was defined under section 194C. Royalty or professional fees was first defined under section 194J, which used to take me to section 9. Similarly, over here, they are defined under section 402 and they take you to section 9 of the Act. Correct? Who's a specified senior citizen? Who's an e-commerce operations? Everything is defined under section 402. There is no change in the definitions as compared to old Act. Right? The definitions are the same, only they are now kept separately. That's it. Correct? So this is like sort of a table where I have my old section. I have now my serial number under section 393(1) of the Act. Right? So my 194H, my commission payments is in serial number 1. My rent is now serial number 2. My purchase of immovable property. We are going to discuss all these important nitty-gritties of these important sections in the coming slides. Right? So this is sort of a chart that I have given, and of course this PPT will be shared. Right? And at the end, what I'll do is also show you the section 393 extract. So coming to payment of contractors, again, this is applicable to on payment to contractors for carrying out any work. Again, contractors work, etc. Everything is defined. TDS is to be done by a designated person, which we saw the definition right now. And it is very important to note that for the purpose of section 194C, even AOP and BOI are tagged with the individual HUF for the turnover limits. Correct? So in all other sections, individual HUF only need to deduct TDS if their turnover is above 50 lakhs and 1 crore. But AOP, BOI need to do it from at the regular limit. Like they have to do it irrespective of the turnover. But for 194C, AOP, BOI will be only applicable if their turnover is above 50 lakhs and 1 crore rupees. TDS rate again remains unchanged, 1% and 2%. Limits again remain unchanged. For goods carriage, TDS need not be done if the contractor owns 10 or less than 10 carriages. Declaration has to be submitted. And now this exclusion is not given under section 393 subsection 1, but it is given under section 393 subsection 4, where there is a table which shows that there is a list where cases where you need not deduct TDS. Correct? Similarly, 194C is not applicable when an individual in HUF engages the contractor for personal purposes. So, for example, your marriage function, for decoration, for newspaper advertisements, if somebody's birthday is there and you want to publish their photo, full front page photo on Times of India, and it's a personal expense. So, in that case, TDS is not applicable. Contract, of course, includes your verbal, written, all sort of contract, subcontracting also. Work includes my advertising, broadcasting, catering, manufacturing and supply using material purchase, which is my subcontracting. Correct? Other services also, repairs, maintenance, car AMC, all those definitions again remain the same. There is an exclusion which states that if there are services provided under section professional technical consultancy, they will be taxed there and not under this section. It is very important. It is important to know that if you get a combined invoice for material and labor, please either ask for separate invoices or then deduct on the entire amount, because it becomes very difficult at an accounting level and even at the return level to sort of bifurcate them. So in case of combined invoices, deduct TDS on the entire invoice value. Now, certain clarifications and certain circulars that have come in, influencer payments. So for example, if you're paying some influencer to promote a product, they will be equivalent to photographers, actors and models. And that's why you have to go to 194J and not 194C, even though it is for advertisement purposes. Correct? Payment to labor contractor will be 194C, but for recruitment agents, for giving you CVs and for hiring employees, it will be 194J and not 194C. Okay. So a lot of also companies pay for sponsorship fees for debates, seminars, a lot of fees to organizations, like say, for example, membership fee to MTPA, MCCI, etc. In that case, you have to see what is the purpose of these memberships. And if it is advertisement, if it is, sort of promotion of business, then even on those payments, we need to do 194C. So if it's for so for example, I'm paying an event management company so that they display my standee on the board, or my name comes in their magazine or in their material. In that case, it will be covered under section 194C. Correct? Again, reimbursement of actual expenses cannot be reduced from the same bill. If something cost to cost is given to me, I will not deduct TDS, subject to provisions of some other TDS sections also that we'll see. Coming to professional technical services and royalty, again, my limits have not changed. My definitions have not changed. So it is 10% and 2% same. Limit has to be seen each payment wise. So if I'm paying 40,000 rupees for professional services and 40,000 rupees for technical services, which fall in the 2% category, in that case, no TDS needs to be deducted. Again, for personal consumption also, TDS under section this TDS under 194J need not be deducted. Correct? Of course, there is going to be a different debate of what is professional and what is technical. Usually, in case if you are making payment to person who's defined as a professional under the Income Tax Act, which are your architects, company secretaries, CAs, engineers, etc., then you stick to the rate of 10%. Otherwise, for other services, you can go for 2%. Purchase of softwares, internet bills. Unfortunately, the definition of royalty under the Income Tax Act is very wide. It covers any process, and the definition of process specifically covers transmission of data through optic cable, right? So purchase of software was any which was covered under the definition of royalty, unless your vendor gives you a declaration that no, I have imported this software, I have purchased this software and I have paid TDS on it, which is on invoice, which is via circular. You have to deduct TDS. Even if your internet bill goes above 50,000 rupees, even that also you probably might have to deduct TDS. Now this is a very interesting section where TDS by individual and HUF on certain sums. Now this is basically applicable only to individuals and HUF, and it is also applicable for making personal payments. Correct? Now what are the types of payments covered? Contractual payments, commission payments, and professional payments. What is the threshold limit? The threshold limit is 50 lakh rupees, right? So for example, if I'm an individual and I'm getting my say son married, and I'm making payment of 60 lakh rupees to an event manager, I cannot say that it is a personal payment. I will not deduct TDS. I will fall under this chapter and I have to deduct TDS and file a form. TAN is not required, but I have to deduct TDS and file a specific form section. I think form 144, we'll discuss that. So all your catering services, advertising services. So basically 194C, J and H, but under a separate section for personal payments only. TDS on rent on property. Again, there is no change per se in these sections. My TDS rate is 2% for plant and machinery and 10% for land, building and factory, and for furniture fittings. Correct? So no change over here. The threshold limit is very important to note, is 50,000 per month and not 6 lakh rupees a year. So if you are only renting out for say 2 months for Feb and March and your rent is 60,000 rupees, in that case, TDS will be applicable. You cannot say that my annual amount was less than 6 lakh rupees. The moment my monthly limit monthly threshold gets crossed, I have to start deducting TDS on rent, right? Similarly, TDS on rent for individuals and HUF, where threshold is of course not crossed, where I'm not falling in the above category. TDS is 2%, where monthly, again over here it's monthly rent payable 50,000 to a resident landlord. It is very important. So a lot of times we observe that people staying in Bangalore and Pune, they have rented houses though from Indian, but they are NRIs and they are making payment to their savings account in India. But it's very important to determine the correct residential status of the landlord. In case they are non-residents, it will fall under section 393 subsection 2, which is section 195, and it will not fall over here. The rate changes, your compliance change, right? So it is very important that for rent payments, you determine that who is your landlord and what is the residential status of the landlord. Correct? In this case also obtaining TAN is not required. You have a one-pager form that you have to fill. TDS on purchase of property, this is 1% if my transaction value is more than 50 lakhs. Now this 50 lakh amount has to be considered in aggregate, not seller wise. So if you're buying a property for 60 lakh rupees and there are two sellers, that does not mean you 30 lakh. So I will not deduct TDS. That 50 lakh TDS has to be done. TDS has to be done on 60 lakhs, irrespective of my individual seller wise limit. Of course, another point to keep in mind is that if you're doing transaction below your stamp duty value, the TDS has to be done on stamp duty value and not on the lower rate. Correct? One very positive change we are looking over here is that when a resident is buying a property from a non-resident, currently what they have to do is they have to compute their capital gain, opt for a lower deduction certificate, take a TAN, and then file the TDS return. From 1st October 2026, taking TAN is not going to be required. You have to deduct TDS on, say, lower deduction certificate or otherwise, or the gross value, and fill a one-pager form that we have for TDS when you are purchasing property from a resident only. But this change is going to be from 1st October 2026 and not from, it's not there right now. Purchase of goods, again, applicability has remained the same. One big change that has happened in this section, according to me, is that earlier, if you read the section, the 50 lakh remit was in any previous year. So the section read that if the aggregate amount of purchase of goods of 50 lakh in any previous year they had mentioned. So there was a position being taken by conservists that no, I have to check. So this section was applicable from 22-23. So from 22-23, I have to see the cumulative limit from that from the buyer. It's not every, so the 50 lakh limit was not every year. Once that 50 lakh limit is crossed, I have to deduct from rupee 1 every year. But now with the table and everything, I think this position is relaxed and you have to check 50 lakh limit every year, the other TDS sections also, right? So TCS has been removed from last year. So only TDS is there now on this. Again, very important section over here, TDS on benefits and perquisites. This is again one of the most ignored sections where we are still in that mindset that if anything is in kind, TDS not to be deducted. As Parishit sir has given an example that a deal between a wholesaler and a retailer, that if a retailer completes a certain target, wholesaler will give them a trip to a foreign country, or they'll give them a car or a laptop or a mobile. In this case, the person giving such benefit or perquisite has to determine the value of that benefit and perquisite as per the valuation rules and then deduct TDS. So if an iPhone is being given, so you have to find out the value of that iPhone given to your retailer and deduct TDS under this section. Correct? Common examples over here are non-returnable products and samples. If you're giving your samples as goods as samples to reviewers and to your retailers, and you're not collecting them back, then it is said that they are benefiting from that. And on that also, you need to start deducting TDS. So tours, events, rewards, etc. to distribute dealers, you have to find out the value, that how much you are paid for tickets, for hotels, for their itinerary, for their local travel over there. And on that amount, you have to deduct TDS under this section. Unfortunately, even reimbursements are covered under this section, right? So for example, your auditor or your chartered accountant has traveled for your official work and they have stayed in a hotel, and that hotel issues a bill in the name of your consultant, your chartered accountant or your consultant, and the consultant claims it back for you. In that case, you cannot say that it is reimbursement, I will not deduct TDS. There's a specific section introduced. There is an FAQ and there's a circular issued by the department which specifically clarifies the situation. So we have to follow that, right? So as long as the bill is in the company's name, then it's fine. But if it's in the consultant's name and that's getting reimbursed, TDS will be applicable on this. The rate is of course 10% and there's a very small threshold of 20,000 rupees. Payments to partners of a firm. So again, introduced a couple of years back now, firms paying salary, remuneration, commission, bonus, interest, any of these to the partner, TDS liability will be triggered 10% is the rate, 20,000 rupees is the threshold limit, right? So a couple of things here that what they have done is that they have also included interest to partners under section 393(4), but that 393(4) is only qua section 393(1), right? This is explicitly covered under section 393(c), and therefore all my salary, remuneration, commission, bonus, interest, TDS will have to be done. This also includes my non-resident partners. Firms, of course, also include LLP. If there is a withdrawal of the capital account, then you, of course, this is subject to the fact that my capital account is positive. If there's a withdrawal from the capital account in case of particular partner, then TDS need not be done. This is practically difficult because again, profitability of the firm cannot be determined at the end of the year, right? But seeing past couple of years as consultants, we should analyze that, and at least a base salary or a base remuneration should be fixed on which TDS is being done. In a way, this is also a good thing because for partners, at the end of the year, there used to be substantial 234B and C liability. So with this coming in, that liability sort of reduces substantially. Certain other points, for dividend, the threshold limit is of 10,000 rupees is only applicable to individual shareholders. In case of a non-individual shareholders, dividend TDS on dividend is applicable from rupee 1. Correct? Of course, the rate of TDS is as per these relevant sections, which is the relevant table, or 20% in case of no PAN, or in case a lower deduction certificate is provided by the deductee, we should use that rate. Right. So if threshold is exceeded, TDS has to be done from the first transaction and not only above the threshold. The only exception to this is my TDS on purchase, which is only above 50 lakh rupees now. Documentation, as Parikshit sir said, that you have to review the invoice, you have to review the agreement, what is the scope of work, whether PAN is taken from your vendor, whether that PAN is valid. In terms of non-resident payments, you have to go through TRC 10F form, right? And of course, 15 CACB and declaration of lower deduction certificate. Coming to lower deduction certificate is now governed by section 395, and the relevant form to file such lower deduction certificate is form 128. Again, the rules and everything remain the same, only the procedural part has changed. Coming to payments and compliances, the new returns and the new payment forms are applicable from FY 26-27 onwards. Even though we were filing Q4 return in the month of May, still my 24Q, 26Q, all the old forms are applicable. The first return will be filed from Q1 under the new rules. Correct? TDS and TCS returns, return dates have now been aligned. Earlier it was 15th and end of the month. Now everything is at the end of the month of the subsequent month for Q1 to Q3. For Q4 it is 31st May. Similarly, the payment also remains the same, 7th of the next month, and for March it is 30th April, right? Form 16 and 16A are now form 130 and 131. Issue dates for these forms remain unchanged, which is 15 days from the end of the quarter. One important change that has happened is now that the TDS returns can only be revised up to 2 years from the end of the year in which the original statements were due. Correct? Earlier this was 6 years. Now, as a product, this is again a very good product for us where we can review the traces portal of our clients and encourage them to get these resolved and charge a fee for it. Again, this is procedural where my salary TDS return forms have changed. The form numbers have changed. As you can see that you don't have now alphanumerical forms. You only have numerical forms because everything is being done from scratch. So all your 24, 26, 27 EQ and confusing are now serially from form 138, 140, 141, right? The cases where TAN need not be obtained and there is a return come statement is form 141. Codes again sort of have been changed. Earlier you had 94H, 92B, 94J. Now in detail, separate payment codes are there for each type of even sub transaction. So we should ensure that the filing and the payment is done under the correct payment codes, because we don't know whether cross utilization of these payment codes vis-a-vis return will work under the new software and the new schema of the department. We'll only get to know in the month of August when all the returns are processed by the tax department, right? So in terms of way forward, of course, the cutoff date is 1st April 2026. We have to update our accounting softwares and ERPs with new sections and codes. I would suggest that you don't continue in the 194J ledger. You have a separate ledger and you have a closure for that ledger, which is under the old act, and accordingly update your accounting softwares and ERPs. Of course, internal checklists and your internal controls also have to be updated with these new payment codes and new sections and new forms. Review old outstanding demand for traces, a very good opportunity. So we, from this session, we have a couple of opportunities. One is that you review your employment structure, CTC, and from a labor law as well as income tax. Second is your ERP and accounting software implementation in terms of these new TDS sections and codes. And the third is this old outstanding demand on traces. You can review and charge for a closure of those. Now, again, as we discussed, whether payment codes can be allocated across all types of payments and returns, ideally it should happen, but we never know with our, backend processing, whether the demands will come. Say, for example, if I pay under section, under code 1026, can I allocate it to 1027? Ideally, there should not be a problem because principally the act clearly states that my all rights and obligations remain the same that were there in the old act reserved as the new act. So this problem ideally should not happen. Again, whether the challan paid under the old act can be utilized for returns filed under 2025 act, ideally yes. So you have an open challan for March 26. Can I use it in the Q1 return? Ideally, it should get allocated and get processed and no demand should come. But we'll only get to know in the month of August. So that's it from my side. And I'm sorry if the session was a bit rushed, but we had to close by 6:15. So we are open for question and answers now. Thank you. $194Q applicable on GST part. No, it will not be applicable on GST part. In terms of, good return letter, you have two options. You can either revise your return and then use that sort of open challan in future. 140 returns are validated with the figures amount not reflected in Form 27A. I did not get this question. Form 140, returns are validated, but figures, amounts paid and tax deducted are not reflected in Form 27A. While generating TDS in our Q1, there is an issue. There could be an issue because see, we are just, I think, on the 6th today. So they keep updating these utilities, I think every week. So I think if there is a technical issue, we should raise a grievance, and I'm sure they will sort of resolve it in the next update for the TDS software. Okay. If supplier have reported sales in GSTR, but due to dispute recipient have not booked such supply, as an expense of account, whether the recipient is liable to deduct TDS on the basis. See, if there is a dispute and you can, I think, substantiate that. So the moot question is, first of all, whether such entry needs to be done in books of accounts. If not, right, then the question of TDS will also not come. Say, for example, whether you have inverted such goods of accounts. If it is in terms of purchase of goods, and if you've not taken the goods or if you've returned the goods, in that case, the question of booking an expense does not arise. And even if you have booked expense and you have sold back, you can raise a credit note from your end and get done with it. Thanks. So I have an important question. TDS on purchase of property from NRI. My client has purchased a flat from NRI. Whether TAN has to be, yes, you will have to apply TAN. If the purchase is made from an NRI in June 2026, you will have to apply a TAN and you have to file the Form 27Q equivalent return, through which Challan TDS deducted paid. I think it's 1057 or something. You can find out, or you will get this a specific answer in tomorrow's session probably. Which form is to be used till September 27Q equivalent, which is so 24, 27 Q is form 144 needs to be done, and the payment is 1057 for the non-resident query. TAN will have to be taken. Under section 194Q, TDS is deducted if the goods are subsequently returned. Yeah, I think you can adjust the excess TDS as long as it's 1 year plus minus. Should not be an issue. Can the income tax department rely on GST data to allege TDS default? No, they cannot rely on GST to be. It might be in the line of questioning, but you have to substantiate that no, I have not taken that service or I have not taken those goods. And that's why there is no accounting input only in my books of accounts. Vehicle repair servicing bill is 2,50,000. Payment to be deducted. I think you should take separate bills, and if not taken separate bills, you should just deduct it. I mean, see, it's always safe to deduct TDS. So if you have a big servicing invoice amount, then deducting partially would be difficult. So it's better that you get in touch with the showroom and they will issue 2 separate bills to you. They will do that. That should not be an issue. If it's a combined bill, might as well deduct on the entire amount. So these were, I think, questions which were received in the initial session. Now let me just.
Question and answer session. Question answer for that?
Professionals having gross receipts. Yes, it will be applicable. 50 lakhs, more than 50 lakhs. So TDS provision applicable for presumptive income file. See, TDS provisions more than presumptive, non-presumptive, you have to check the turnover. My client started buildership in 25-26. No, buildership as in, but under what entity? Is it like proprietorship? It is partnership? Is it LLP? So basically what you have to do is, I'll just show you the names section. Probably this will give everybody a better idea. Right. So for any type of payment, you have to see who's the payer, right? So any person, specified person, person other than specified person. This will give you a good clarity of when you need to deduct TDS. Because all these are specifically designed now, are now under section 402, and then they are not linked to any other section. So designated person. So your 194Q question, previous year 50 lakh and deducted TDS, in this current year, can we deduct from rupee 1 onwards or after 50 lakhs? Please clarify. So this is what we discussed, that in the current year, you may take a position that probably it's not applicable for the first 50 lakhs, and only above 50 lakhs it will be applicable. Because until last year, under Income Tax Act 1961, the section read as in any previous year if 50 lakhs is crossed. So this was like a conservative position taken earlier, but considering the table and everything over here, so if you look at the table here, in other cases, any sum exceeding 50 lakh rupees for purchase of any goods, right? Threshold as per note 1. You go to note 1, the tax shall be deducted on the sum exceeding 50 lakhs, right? And if we go to the main section, the main section is only applicable during the tax year. It does not say previous tax years. So this was in any previous year. This was there under earlier 124. So from this year, you might say that now 50 lakh rupees, that I don't need to deduct on first 50 lakhs. If turnover is above 1 crore by an individual and he's filing 44 AD, threshold 44 AD ka limit 1 crore hi hai na, 2 crore ho gaya abhi. But in that case, it will be applicable, no? Then, yeah, because over here specified person is defined as 50 lakh. Books are not maintained. Yeah, one can argue. Yeah. So again, over there, you'll have to sort of take help of the case laws. That books are not maintained, no amount paid credit, that's why TDS not applicable. In that case, the officer might not be able to disallow the expenses, but TDS proceedings might go on under the erstwhile 201 section, assessing in default. I think this issue for 1 to 2 crores and 50 lakhs to 75 lakhs is sort of there for 44 AD and 44 AD. I think we are not received any question from a minute. नहीं झाले तो हो गए सब. हाँ, इधर 1 मिनट, इधर के सब हो गए क्लैरिफाइड. आई इवन एड्रेस व्हाट्सएप पीके भी कर दिया. हाँ, आई थिंक सो. या वी आर डन. या
Oh, hello. Yes. Thank you, Parikshit sir. Thank you, Shravanji. Thank you so much. As we conclude today's interactive session and technical proceeding of this conclave, now on behalf of Maharashtra Tax Practitioner Association, I sincerely thank our distinguished speakers, dignitaries, our technical team, volunteers, and every participant who join us physically at Gnan Mandir Hall through Zoom and live on our YouTube channel. Your enthusiastic participation has truly made this hybrid conclave a grand success. Thank you so much. We look forward to welcoming you again in our tomorrow's session at 2:45 sharp. Until then, stay updated, stay compliant, and keep learning. Thank you very much. Jai Hind, Jai Maharashtra. Leave करू करे बंद